Advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. Welcome to the show. It's Thursday. We're towards the end of August. Somebody explained to me, it's like I'm on a ride that's going really fast. Where has this year gone? And a lot of us are back to school, which is very exciting, and a lot of nerves and a little anxiety to go with it. But hopefully we can address some of that here in the next 3 hours. We are going to be with you live for the next 3 hours. I know it seems amazing, and yet we always run out of time. We're going to be talking about topics having to do with autism and how we can be the most effective, efficient members of a team working with a child who is on the autism spectrum. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a practitioner, I think we all share the goal that we want for our kids, and I say our kids because I know when you're a teacher, you refer to them as your kids too. They are. They're, in a sense, they're your kids. We want our kids to reach their highest potential, whatever that is, and we are well aware of the fact that that means different things for different children. And I think it's important to note that on a regular basis. However, the bigger picture that I want everybody to be reminded of, and to remind myself on a regular basis, is that there is progress available for all of our kids. If there's one thing that I'm constantly bombarded by when I'm out in the world outside our community, it's this idea that, well, when somebody has autism and this is what it is and there's nothing you can do about it and these behaviors and there's nothing, and I know that inside our community, the vast majority of people know that that's not the case, that our kids make progress. They learn and they grow and they get better and they gain skills, and their challenging behavior can be diminished or gotten rid of entirely, and that there is that hope. But unfortunately, sometimes that information that is outside of our community that persists, that, well, autism, there's nothing you can do about it. And by the way, it is pervasive among our medical profession and sometimes among people in education that, well, that's autism, there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes that seeps into the community, and I'm always frustrated when I meet either a parent who just had their child diagnosed and they've had people in their ear telling them, yeah, well, get used to this, that, and the other thing. That's so frustrating to me. Or the parents that have been on this journey for a really long time who haven't gotten the information, and have this feeling of, okay, well, this is where we are, and there's nothing else that we can do about it. And that I'm always grateful to meet those people, because I like to further that message that no. There is help and there's hope for all of our kids, wherever they are on the spectrum, no matter what age they are. There are things that can be done. There is more work to be done, more potential to be revealed. And that's a lovely thing. So we talk a lot about that. You will hear us talk quite a bit about ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, because we know that it's the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism, and science has demonstrated that it is effective in creating progress for all of our kids. No matter what their age is, no matter where they're on the spectrum, we can target individual behaviors and we can see progress. That's a good thing. So we'll talk about that. Plus which, it's such a huge field, and because it is not it's not a magic bullet that there is one thing you do for all children. All of our kids are different. There is no cookie cutter that works for them. I'm sorry that there isn't, but the good news is that if you learn a bunch of tools and you apply them in a creative way that's specific to your child, that's when you see the progress. So we do talk about what the tools are and try to acquire them and learn about them, because that's going to help us to be the most efficient, most effective member of a team working with a child on the autism spectrum. And so we will talk about ABA, but I always like to remind everybody, I am not an ABA expert. Whew, that is the understatement of the year. Every day I learn how much I don't know about ABA, and I'm not an expert in autism. I'm here to sort of, be the tour guide to take you around and introduce you to the people and the ideas that can help you, those experts. So keep that in mind. I'm just one of the foot soldiers like you are, trying to learn all this stuff. But I have been granted access on your behalf to talk to a wide range of people on your behalf. So let's go over some of the different ways that you can participate in this conversation, so that you can ask the questions or make the suggestions of the topics that you want to see. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com, you'll see that there's a box in which I'm speaking, and next to that there's a box that says Shannon is answering right now. Below that, there is a box that is active right now if it says that. So all you have to do, if it says Shannon is answering, it's active, all you have to do is type into that box, hit enter, and your comment shows up magically right here on my screen. You don't have to fill out any forms, you don't have to give a credit card, you don't have to give your email address, completely anonymous, and there is no cost for it. Hit enter and it shows up here, and it could be a question about something we talked about 2 weeks ago, it can be a question about something we've never covered, it could be a question for Angela Persicke, who's coming in at 10:20 to talk about bedtime rituals. So take advantage of that, give us your questions, your comments, your suggestions. We really appreciate it. It helps us to be more effective in helping you, and that's really why we're here. Okay, so if you're watching autism-live.com and it doesn't say Shannon is answering right now, that means we're not live. It probably says rebroadcast, but you can still get a hold of us, and there's the email address that you can write to. We will get your email address, we'll answer it on the next available live show, but we'll also send you a typewritten response. And sometimes it's not us sending the typewritten response. Sometimes we will forward it on to an expert and have them answer your question, which is a really fun thing. That does take a couple of days. It's not the instant gratification that just typing in the box and hitting enter is, and then I talk about it. But it's a really great way to get some information, and we love to hook you up with information. So, but if email's not your thing, there are other ways. You could phone into the show. We have a phone line. You can call in right now. You and I can have a little coffee clatch right here and talk about things. Whatever it is that you want to talk about, you can call in. And if you want to call in and not talk to somebody on the show, there are people standing by to take your phone call and help you to figure out if you're saying, look, this is, we're having an IEP meeting and I have this question, and whatever the question is, we'll help you, we'll steer you in a direction so you can find the answers that you want. If we're not here, if nobody is here, if it's after business hours, you can leave a message and we will get back to you the next time we are here. Sometimes over the weekend, that's a long time, but that too passes. So there are other ways, though, that you can get a hold of us. You can Skype into the live show if you would like. We've been doing that with a lot of people, and we're going to be doing that tomorrow with a special guest. We'll talk about that in a little while. So Skype into the show. If you have camera capability on your computer, we're happy to put a picture up on the screen of you. We'll be side by side or just you alone on the screen talking to myself or to any expert that we have in the studio. So Skype is a wonderful thing to do. And by the way, you can do that internationally. We have internationally Skyped with great success. So feel free. And if you don't have a camera on your computer, I know I don't on my one at home, that's okay. You can Skype in audio only. It's like we're talking on the phone. It's a great thing. We've been able to do that with people in the past. So please Skype away. You can also talk to us on our Facebook page. We are Autism Live on Facebook, and lots of interesting resources on that page, and we always post the question of the day there. Please participate in any way that you can. Yesterday, the question of the day was, what challenging behaviors does your child engage in that you've been able to see progress in? And I was saying to everybody yesterday, so important, if you have a minute to write in for that, because there are people out there who are living with that challenging behavior that you've seen progress on, and they don't know that they can see progress. So, but every day we have a question of the day, and I do think that it helps for you to answer the question of the day, because you never know who's going to see what you've written and be uplifted by it, or to say, oh, thank goodness somebody else feels this way too. I'm not alone, that sometimes I'm depressed, or, feel like I'm not going to be able to do this. I think it really helps when we say our truths, whether they're the good ones or the bad ones, and share them with each other. So participate on Facebook. You can leave us messages there. You can leave your suggestions there, whatever you would like, and talk to other people. If you want to get hooked up with other people, sometimes that's a great way to do it. And there are wonderful, resources there as well. I'm having this thing every morning where I get I don't know, I get a tickle in the throat. It's not a good thing. Hopefully I'm not going to choke to death like I did yesterday. Anyway, let's move on. You can also tweet with us. So feel free to log in and tweet away with us. We really appreciate communicating with you in that way. And you can answer the question of the day there, or make suggestions, comments, questions, whatever you would like on Twitter. All right. I mentioned that you could be watching us on autism-live.com, but there's so many ways in which you can watch the show. And this came about, by the way, because viewers like you wrote in and said, hey, it's wonderful that we can watch autism-live.com, and it's wonderful that it plays 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but I want to tune into the exact moment last Thursday when your guest said this. How do I do that? And so we've created several different ways in which you can do that, or search a topic. So one of the ways you can do that is on blip.tv. We have our own channel there, and you can go and find all of our archived episodes. If you know the day that you're looking for and you go, I knew she was going to have Holly Robinson Pete on that Wednesday and I missed it, you can go and look up that very specific date, or you can type in Holly Robinson Pete, or if there's a topic and you say, I really have to know about bedwetting, type it in, and you can find episodes that have to do with that. By the way, you can also do that on our YouTube channel, and I love YouTube because not only can you find the thing that you're looking for, but you can really easily share it on Facebook, or if you've got a friend who's been dealing with an issue and you guys have been talking about it, and you say, here, take a look at this. This is what this expert had to say about pica, or this is what this expert said about getting your child to bed. Or I thought this was really interesting about this, and then you can share away. Instead of having to explain it, just hit share and they get to see what the expert said for themselves. It's a really efficient way to do it. Hey, by the way, we're also available as a free download on iTunes. That's picture and sound. You can archive it yourself, or be able to take it on vacation, whatever you would like to do. And we are also available on Ustream. All of those ways, by the way, are totally free. Free download on iTunes, free on YouTube, of course, free on Blip. Our information and our archives are free. I know that there are some people that are having webinars and they're having their library, and there's a cost to them, and I appreciate the fact that they have to stay in business and all those things, but this information, I'm very happy to say, is free to you, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Okay. So, and my little disclaimer, I mentioned before, I'm not an expert at these things, but as those of you who watch the show know, I'm a mom. This is my highest credential in life, but I used to be a teacher as well. And my son was diagnosed with autism at 2.5. He was very profoundly affected with autism. We started ABA therapy right after his 3rd birthday, and we had intensive ABA therapy for 5 years. And so while I'm not an expert in ABA, I do know some of what it takes to start an ABA program in your home, and some of what it's like to deal with the day in, day out. It's not an easy thing. There's nothing easy about this. And I know I like to, talk about what's possible and what can we do, and lift you guys up to let you know that I think you're doing an awesome job, just an awesome, awesome job. But I want you to know that I get how hard it is. Boy, howdy do I. So that's why I'm here, and I know that in the beginning when my child was diagnosed with autism, and I've said this 1,000 times before, my thing was I couldn't sleep. I paced the floor at night thinking, what am I going to do? I really felt like it fell to me, and what was I going to do? And I felt like I needed to solve it personally all on my own. I've talked before about how I have this expectation that I'm in some way supposed to be super mom, but every time I even think that, I get my cape caught in the fan behind me. It's not a good thing. I'm not a super mom at all, demonstrated by the many mistakes that I have made along the way. But I thought that I was supposed to, and I had tremendous guilt that I wasn't, and didn't think that I was up to this challenge. And I paced and paced and paced, and I got incredibly lucky. It wasn't that I was smarter. It certainly wasn't that I had more money, because boy, that wasn't the truth. And it wasn't that I knew people, because I didn't, but I got incredibly lucky. And once we got incredibly lucky, we worked really hard. And the person who worked the hardest, can I just tell you, was my kid. The other day, he said something about, first he said, I just want to be lazy. And then he said to me, well, I'm just a lazy person. And I said, you know what? Don't ever say that to me again. You are the hardest working person I have ever met in my entire life. And you've had to work harder to get things that people take for granted. So, I love that you have the language now, because he sure didn't at 3. It didn't at 2.5 to say, I want to be lazy or I am lazy. That to get to there, the work that he put in, oof, and the team of people that helped, amazing, absolutely amazing. But what happened was I realized very quickly how amazingly lucky I was. Lucky that I found the right people to work with, lucky that I found the right tools, lucky that I could rearrange my circumstances to make it happen, lucky that I had a child who did the work and settled down to the work and was so desperate to find a way to communicate with us that he was willing to do the work, and lucky that he made the progress that he did. I like to say I'm the luckiest person, but did my son have the absolute best outcome with autism? No, he didn't. But I still acknowledge how lucky I am. And when I realized that and thought, okay, there are people who did not get that luck. There are people who didn't have access, didn't live where I lived, so that they had access to the funding and access to the people that I had access to just by virtue of where I lived and what I asked for, because people told me what to ask for. And that is when my mission became to be able to help you be luckier. I want to help you to be luckier than you have been. I want to save you time. I want to save you money so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and to help you to get the answers that you need and that you want, and that I know are keeping you up at night, because I remember what that felt like. And the truth of this matter is that we need to find a way to level the playing field so all of our kids can be as lucky as my child was, and all parents can be as lucky as I am. So please know that's why I'm here. Because if I can save you 5 minutes and $5, then that's a good day for me. And if I can save you more than that, as I hook you up with experts so that you don't have to wonder or feel that you're alone in this, then, that's job one for me when I'm here. Of course, when I'm not here, job one for me is my kid and helping him to continue with his progress. And we're going to talk more about what job one is for all of us, because please know, wherever you are, can I tell you, I went to a meeting last night and I met 2 incredible moms, and I left there and I was feeling like, wow, I just met these 2 incredible women who are doing so much. And I walked away and I thought, I am not doing enough. And the whole way home I was beating myself up about, I'm not doing enough, I'm not getting enough done. And I talked to a friend of mine, another autism mom, and she was like, oh, it's that autism mom disease where it doesn't matter what we do, we never feel like it's enough. We always feel like, man, I missed the boat. Man, I didn't do this. I should have done this. I should help this person. I should do that. And she reminded me, we're all doing the very best that we can. We all are. And that it's so important to acknowledge that in ourselves, and so important to acknowledge that in each other, and to say it, because sometimes we can't hear it. And boy, she did it for me last night. And she said, you know what? You're doing what you can. And I want to pass that on to you. You're doing what you can. And especially, no matter where you are, job one is your child. If you get to the point where your child is doing well enough, then it's time to see who else you can help on this way. And by the way, that can be a 5-minute conversation. That can be forwarding an email to somebody so that they get the information. That can be, taking an afternoon and having a play date with somebody. There are lots of different ways that we can all help. But whatever you're doing, I want you to know you're doing a great job. And that when we go into the guilt land, it's just part of what happens, right? And that we don't have to live there. Okay. Enough said about that. All right. We like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is the time of day when we make friends with the terms that are going to be so important in our child's life. I said at the beginning, we want to be the most effective, most efficient member of the team. And can I just tell you that in the beginning, I didn't want to have anything to do with the jargon. I was like, this is a silly, ridiculous, made-up language. Could you please just speak in terms that I understand about my child? I really was militant about it. And then I came to realize that that was a waste of time. We were saying yesterday when we were talking about insurance, oh, you're kidding me? Now we got to understand these insurance terms too. Well, if that's what it is, that's what it is. I just would rather get it over, make it be as painless as possible. So that's what we try to do with you here, make it as painless as possible. We give you one word, one phrase, one anagram a day, and I give you an actual definition, and I make fun of the actual definition and how full of jargon it is, and then we give you a working definition, which hopefully is clearer, and hopefully I give you an example that makes sense, that you can begin to relate to your individual's child and your individual circumstance, so that after time, these terms start to build up and you really start to understand and you can use them to your benefit. That's what it's all about. Save yourself time and get what you need using the terms. And that's certainly true with today. Today's term is FBA. I know the first time I heard it, I thought, FBI, FBR, FB. I'm so bad when we string together letters. I can't remember them. I can't, right? But FBA, what does this stand for? This stands for Functional Behavior Assessment. Now, do you have to remember that it stands for Functional Behavior Assessment? No, you really don't. All you have to be able to do is say FBA. If it helps you, think FBI, but with an A instead of an I. FBA, Functional Behavior Assessment, is a multi-step problem-solving assessment process, again with the assess, we put the words that are in the title, in the definition, designed to determine the function of a behavior. Okay, so assessment is a word that is used a lot in education and used a lot in psychology. Think, test or survey. It's a way that we're going to judge where we are with something. So that's the assessment. It's a multi-step problem-solving assessment process designed to determine the function of the behavior. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Let's look at our working definition. An essential process that helps us understand why a challenging behavior is happening so that we can change it effectively. We talk about this a lot on the show, that everything that our kids do, they do for a reason. Now, that's a huge concept to get your head wrapped around. And in the beginning, I was like, is that true? Really? I don't know if that's true. And then they were able to show me some examples and go, let's look at everybody's behavior, your behavior, my behavior, our child's behavior. Everybody is in the middle of behavior right now. And everything that we do on a regular basis, there's a reason for it. There is some sort of paycheck that we get for doing behaviors over and over and over again. So sometimes our kids engage in behavior that is so outside our experience that it seems like it's random, right? You just go, really? I have no idea why my child does this, like, the whole opening and closing doors. And you look at that and you go, why are they doing that? And at some point you hear somebody in your head go, well, that's the autism. That's the autism, it's under that restrictive and repetitive behaviors. That's the autism. Okay, all right, there's a measure of truth to that. Under restrictive and repetitive behaviors, which is the third column in the autism diagnosis that currently exists, that's all about to change, right? But yeah, there are things like opening and closing doors repetitively and obsessively. Yeah, that's a symptom. It's not the only symptom, and you can't get an autism diagnosis just with that, but yeah, it's one of the symptoms that would be problematic and be looked at if somebody was doing to see if they qualify for an autism diagnosis or if they're somewhere on the spectrum. But it leaves out the fact that there is a reason why the child is opening and closing the door. It is not just random. We don't do, none of us, not even our kids on the autism spectrum, do things randomly. There is always a reason. All behavior is communication in some respect, and the more challenging the behavior, the louder the communication is. And there is always, always, always a reason why we do behaviors over and over and over again. There's some sort of paycheck for it. So if the child is standing there and opening and closing the door, they are getting some sort of paycheck. Well, if we want the opening and closing of the door to stop, and I know some of you have children who do this or obsess on the elevator doors, trying to get a child that obsesses on elevator doors onto an elevator. Oh, it can be a really difficult thing, right? And if we want to change this behavior, we want the child to be able to progress past that, we can. But we have to start by understanding what the paycheck is. What is the paycheck? If we assume, and there's four main culprits usually that we look at. There are, sometimes others, but there's four main culprits that can easily be looked at to see, is it one of these four things? And if we assume that we know which one it is and just say, okay, we're going to put an intervention in place, and you will see people do this, that they'll say, okay, well, the child is biting, so here is our intervention for biting. And we put the intervention in place, and the child doesn't stop biting, and everybody goes, well, this doesn't work. Well, we didn't stop to consider, why is the child biting? If we don't know why the child is biting and we put an intervention in place, we are just hunting in the dark. And I say this all the time, we don't do this with our cars. We don't. We don't just pull into the mechanic and say, take the water pump out. I'm having difficulty with my car, take the water pump out. Why don't we do that? Because it may not be the water pump, and that will cost us time and money and potentially leave us in a situation where we're not safe driving the car because we didn't take the time to figure out why the car was doing what it was doing. So why we think we should do this with our children is completely not rational, although I used to do it and still on occasion think that I can do this. But we save ourselves time and we get to more success if we will do an FBA. FBA, it's a process, and it's an experienced person who sits down to do it. They look at the behavior from a 360-degree perspective, and they say, okay, what is driving this behavior? What is the function? What is the paycheck of this behavior? And those four main culprits we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but I want you to understand that for an FBA, it is it's a diagnostic thing, that's an assessment that's taken to figure out what is paying off the behavior. So if the child is opening and slamming the door and you want the child to stop doing it, you ask for an FBA. You don't have to remember that it's a functional behavior assessment, but you ask for an FBA. The expert comes and says, the function of this behavior, that the reason why the child is opening and closing the door is whatever, and here is the effective treatment for that, because we know what effective treatments are once we know the function. For every single function that there is, we know that there's there's 32 different variables, but we know these are the things that work. Scientifically been proven, but until we know the function, we're shooting in the dark. So when your child's at school and your child is engaging in a behavior and getting those notes, and the note comes home and says, oh, Susie Beth threw toys today, right? And the first time it happens and you ask what happened and what's going on, right? What are you guys doing about it, right? It's the first time that it's happened, and, you know, we're not overreacting here. But if Susie Beth starts throwing toys and it's 3 days in a row, now we know if she's done it more than twice, we know there's a paycheck there. And it may not be something that has to do with Susie Beth. It may have something to do with somebody else in the classroom. But if you don't want for this behavior to turn into something where Susie Beth goes to a more restrictive environment, it's time to request an FBA. And you have the right to do that. You send off the email to your principal or whoever the head of your IEP team is and says, we have had notes that Susie Beth has been throwing 3 days in a row. We are requesting an FBA. And then they have to comply. Somebody has to come in, look at it, give you a function, you get a behavior intervention plan, and everybody adheres to it because it's the law, and Susie Beth stops throwing toys. Right? And we can do that in the classroom. We can also do it at home, too. At home, it becomes a thing where you request for a BCBA to come into your home, and there are different ways in different states and different parts of the world. Sometimes, yes, it has to be you paying for it. It's worth it. It's worth it, because then you know what to do for the behavior. Okay, we're going to talk more about this, but I want you to know the FBA is the thing you ask for when your child is engaging in a behavior and you want to get help. FBA, ask for it. Okay, we always have a question of the day. Our question of the day today is, what's the hardest time of day for you? And is it harder because of your child's challenging behavior? You know, for me, the hardest time of the day is bedtime because I am pooped. Can I tell you, after coming here and doing the show in the morning, 9 o'clock at night, starting at like 8, I swear to you, my IQ drops. My functionality, right here, right? And I am not the nicest person that I could be because I'm cranky, I'm tired, I'm past it. And, you know, any rational person talking to me about it says, well, you should go to bed earlier. Well, of course I should. And we're going to be talking about bedtime rituals a little bit later on with Angela Persicke. But what happens is because, and if I'm honest, I would say that, you know, my ability to deal with things probably goes down every hour after 3 o'clock. So that by the time 8 o'clock rolls around and I'm trying to get my child in bed, and he senses that I am not entirely with it. So my ability to carry consequences forward and do it in a way that I should be and to follow an intervention plan, right? So that time of the day, it's like two things feeding off each other. My inability to follow through. It's a difficult time for my son as well, and he will engage in his challenging behavior to see what he can get away with, because he will yak at me. And I swore that I would never get mad at him for talking. For after all those years when he didn't talk, I swore I would never, ever be in a position where I would tell my child to be quiet or stop talking, you know, and yet every night I'm like, you have got to stop talking. You have got to stop talking. It is time that you are laying completely horizontal on the bed with your eyes closed and your mouth closed. It's a difficult time for me, made more difficult by my son's challenging behavior, but, you know, it's the chicken and the egg, which comes first. And I would guarantee you that my child is recognizing in me that he can get away with more. He can get away with more, but it's an unpleasant time, and we're working on it because I'm trying to take ownership of the fact and pre-plan and set myself up for success. I'll keep you posted on that. It gets a little bit better every day, but my ability to follow through is compromised at that time. It is. I'm just going to be honest about it. And in an ideal world, I would call in some help and support at that time of night. But unfortunately, my husband, most nights, he works until 10 o'clock at night. So, you know, there are times when he comes through the door at like 10:30 and I'm like, help, right? Especially during the summer. Help me get this child to bed because I'm past it. Excuse me. Okay, so, but write into us on Facebook. I'd love to know what's the most difficult time for you, and is it related in any way to your child's challenging behavior? Let's see if we can tackle it together, and we'll ask the experts. And Angela Persicke is going to come in a little bit later and give us all a little help with the bedtime thing, because I know some of you have been writing in on that. Okay, we always have a topic of the day, and really it's the topic of the week. I'm sure you can guess what it is already. We're talking about challenging behavior. And we could talk about this till the cows come home. We talked a little bit about tantrums yesterday. We talked a little bit about meltdowns and the three-term contingent, and how for every behavior there's a before and there's an after. And that we don't have a whole lot of control over the actual behavior, right? And I think that this is the gateway to sanity right here, because I can't tell you how many times I've got myself being someplace and saying to my son, stop that, don't do that, stop kicking the chair, stop that, stop kicking the chair, and thinking something's going to change, right? And then you get into that thing where you try to hold their leg like that's going to work. I think of Ileana Vincent, heal yourself. Like that's going to, like suddenly that is going to be effective. How many times have I tried that and it doesn't work? What are you going to do? Squeeze them forever and hold their legs so that they, no. We don't have that much control over the actual behavior, especially the older they get and the bigger they get, because physically you can't make somebody do something. But we do have a lot of control over what happens before the behavior, and man, do we have a lot of control over what happens afterwards. So the before is called the antecedent, the after is called the consequence, and we're going to be talking a little bit today about antecedent modifications and consequence-driven interventions so that we can affect change with these challenging behaviors. The thing I want you to know, once we know the function of the behavior, man, we can get this done. We can take care of this, diminish challenging behaviors, and in a lot of cases, completely extinguish them. Oh, it's such a lovely thing, such a lovely thing. Okay, so keep the faith, stick with us. We're going to be talking about these kinds of things. All right, some of the things on our schedule today. Oh, it's Compliance Day. I love to talk about compliance. You know that about me. So we're going to talk about compliance, and especially how we begin to work on compliance today, no matter what age your child is, because it's really vastly different depending on the age of the child and their skill level and where they are. We have the myth of the day, and then later on today at 10:20 we're going to have BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst Angela Persicke. She is in the research area, and she's going to be talking with us specifically about bedtime rituals. But if you have other questions, write in. You can write in right now. But Angela normally joins us at 11 o'clock, but today she's got a meeting at 11 o'clock, so she'll be with us at 10:20. You don't want to miss that. All right, let's take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about compliance. Oh, it's the best of times when you have compliance. Stick with us. Currently, in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're going to take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen Grandpichet and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah, Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Teacher has some glasses.
Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
I have 2 children with autism. I can't imagine a day without CARD or the therapists. They've been so instrumental in helping us with our kids and shaping their lives and helping us help them.
Thank you, Christina Big Alex.
Thank you, Jackie and Mariana.
We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable, and recovery from autism is possible.
Welcome back to Autism Live. It's that time of the week when we talk about compliance, and I always like to say that compliance, Dickens, The Tale of Two Cities, that starts with, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I feel like this is the story of compliance, because when you have compliance on board, everything is easier. Absolutely everything, from going out to the car, to brushing teeth, to getting dressed in the morning, to, the child performing well in school, to the child being able to learn from your ABA lessons, for the child being able to perform safely, for the child to learn, but also just the running of your day. That moment, how many times a day do we put demands on our child and we ask them to do something, and if they do it, without us having to ask 12 times, how much more energy do we have to take on other things? So it's far-reaching. When you have a child that is compliant, your hope level goes up and your ability to cope goes up. And what you get done increases exponentially, right? So how are we going to get compliance? It's one of the first things that we work on with a child when we start an ABA program, because it's a prerequisite for everything. How are you going to teach? In a minute, we're going to talk about executive functions and some of the different things that we can teach to kids along the way that help them to be success-driven and goal-driven and be able to meet their goals and achieve them. But you're not going to get any of that. You can't start to work on any of that until you have compliance. And when I'm talking about compliance, when we talk about compliance here on the show, we're not talking about just being obedient. Obedience is a wonderful thing, but I really want to introduce to your head that compliance, when I'm talking about compliance, I mean that the child is happy to comply. Obedience to me suggests that they're going to do what you ask them to do just because you ask them to do it, because that's the expectation. Where what we're working for is compliance, where you ask the child to do something and the child does it happily because they know that good things are going to happen as a result of them complying. So how do we teach this? Once you start to have compliance, and if you've worked on it in the proper way, it just feeds on itself. And the child wants to be more compliant because they know, hey, when I'm compliant, good things happen. The example that Evelyn Gould always uses is that when our child does something that we like, it should be as if we've turned on lights and there's a party in the room. That it's that exciting to do the right thing. And when they don't do the thing that they want, it's as if, just nothing happened. There's no punishment. We're not berating children. We're not nagging at them. I know. Yes, I just said that. Me, queen of the nag. Because that's the hardest thing for me. I want to nag, 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 nag. If I nag, 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 wop, 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 wop. Right? But it doesn't work. And I don't know why. I think it's going to miraculously someday. But it doesn't. But compliance training does work. And when it does work, and the first time you see it, and I know I'm asking you to be believers when you haven't seen this already, but the first time you see it work with your own child, you go, oh, where else can I use this? It's the beginning of a new world. Literally, for you, it's like they turned on the lights and the party happened. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of different things. How do we make compliance? How do we start compliance training? How do we get a child to understand when you do the thing that I want you to do, the lights are going to come on and the party happens? And is it different if you have a child who's very young versus a child who's very old? Is it a difference if you have a child who has virtually no language, receptively or expressively, or if you have a child who is 12 years old and is speaking but is having compliance issues? Yeah, it's different. Let's start with a very young child who does not have a high level of expressive or receptive language. Can we teach compliance? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, we can. In a minute, we're going to be watching the A Word, and I want to encourage you to go and watch some of the early episodes of the A Word. It's in like the second, not the second, because we're showing that today, but it's in like the third or the fourth episode that you see a little snippet of Jessica, the therapist in the video, working on some early compliance training with Jack Riley. And she's doing something that's really typical in early compliance training of giving something that is a very, very simple instruction using as few words as possible and starting with something that has the potential to be very reinforcing. So she's starting with, come here. And literally we're paring it down to those two words, come here. That we say to a child, come here. Now, if you have a child who's young and on the autism spectrum and has virtually no receptive or expressive language, then you could say, come here till the cows come home, and your child's not coming, right? That's how my child was at 3. I could have said, come here, and I could have had Cirque du Soleil behind me, and he wasn't going to come because he was interested in something on his fingernail or whatever, and it was as though he couldn't even hear me. So how do we get that really, young child who does not understand what come here means and has no idea that they're going to be rewarded for it to come? Well, we're going to do a full physical prompt probably. I think it's a great idea to assess and see and sit in a place where you're minimizing distractions. You'll see on the video that Jessica's sitting in a hallway with closed doors. So there aren't a whole lot of other places that he can run off to. And she's sitting on the floor and she says, come here to him. And he doesn't. He's like interested in the doorknob. He's looking at his reflection in the doorknob, whatever. And she waits just like a 2 count. She says, come here. She waits a 2 count. He doesn't come. Of course he doesn't come. We're not going to get angry at him. We might as well have said something to him in Greek. He doesn't understand what come here means. So what she does is she reaches over very gently and she picks him up and she says, come here. She picks him up and brings him over and she says, that's coming here. Good job. And she gives him a tickle on the belly. Now she picks him up and she puts him back where he was, right? We're just going to do it again. And she says, come here. Now, is he going to get it the first time? No, he's not going to get it the first time. And are we going to be angry or upset or despondent or disappointed? No, because that's not our expectation. But we're going to keep doing it over and over and over again. So she puts him back and she says, come here. And, and he's like, I don't know what's going on here. She just picked me up. She moved me. I don't know what's going on. And she waits the 2 count again and he doesn't come. And she says, no. And she reaches over and she brings him again. And she says, come here. She picks him up and she brings him and he's there. And she says, that's come here. Good job. And she ruffles his hair, tickles his belly, things that he likes. If it's a child that doesn't like to be touched, we're finding something else to do, right? But right now we're giving a little bit of reinforcement for it, not the big whatever the big reinforcement is, right? She puts him right back and she says, come here. And now maybe this time, because he's noticing a little bit more and you see their body language, if he isn't paying any attention at all, she's still going to do the full physical prompt. But the first time that he shows a little inkling of something's going on here and I like it when I go there and I like how she's behaving when I go there, she's going to start to fade the prompt back a little bit. So she'll say, come here, and she'll give it a 2 count and wait, and he doesn't come, and she says, no, come here. Right, and she reaches out her arms but doesn't grab a hold of him. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm starting to get it. You say come here and you want me to come, and nice things happen. So he comes and she says, yes. And now she's upping the ante a little on the reinforcement. Good coming here. What a good job. Yay. Tickle, 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 tickle. And now we put him back. Put him back there. Come here. And she waits the 2 count, and maybe this time, maybe, but maybe not, he actually comes to her. But the first time that he comes to her without her prompting, we pull out the big party, whatever it is. If the child, whatever their favorite thing is, if it's potato chips, if it's hot dogs, if it's, time with mommy, we hope it's something that's fairly quick, and we're pairing praise with it all the time. If it's their little blue doggy that's sitting behind the therapist and they pull out the blue dog and go, yay! And they get nuzzled by the blue doggy, and the blue doggy tickles them, and it's all wonderful, and it's, yay, you did such a good job. And then we put the child back, come here, and now the child comes and runs here. Now, have we taught the child come here, and have we taught child compliance? Probably not. We're probably going to want to work on this more and more and more, but what we're teaching the child in that moment is when I ask you to do something and you come and do it, it's always going to be pleasant. It's always going to be great. And when you do it without me having to prompt you, it's going to be fantastic. And this is how we make the inroad. And we really work on come here until the child gets it. But it's never at any point are we like, oh, come here. Right? That's not going to get it done. It just isn't. We're not going to get that happy, compliant child. Maybe eventually you'll get an obedient child, but in order to do the hard things that we're going to do further down the road, we need a child who's happy to be compliant. So we're teaching, you do what I ask you to do, and yay! And we're going to work on come here, and then we'll branch out into the next thing, whatever it is. It might be sit down, it might be stand up, depending on what is necessary for this child or what we think is going to be the next thing, because we want to start on things that we have a hope that they're going to get in a relatively quick way. And I do say relative. Okay, so but again, the thing that we're working on here is making it crystal clear to them. You do what I ask you to do, and the lights go on and the party happens. And then we branch that out to other things. Then we can start to work on that with eye contact, and we can start to work on that with joint attention, and we can start to work on that with ecoics and all these other lessons that will help our child to progress. But we got to start with compliance, and we have to make sure that we're making it abundantly crystal clear to the child, when you do what I ask you to do, it is the best of all times for you. And then the payoff is it's the best of all times for us. But that's how we start. Now that's with a very young child who doesn't have receptive language. Let's go to a child who is older and has language, has receptive language, and is very obstinate and really difficult. What we want to do then is to ask them to do something that we know that they already want to do. Think about that for a second. So, you're trying to get your child to get ready to go to school, and come on. And that's what they're saying to you. They're like, why are you hurrying me? I don't particularly want to go. Where's the paycheck for me in this, right? You're asking me to do something I don't want to do. So instead, when we put the focus on ask them to do something that they already want to do, and then reward them for doing it, you're paving the way. You instantaneously change the moment. You're going to have to fill that bank over and over and over again. But when I can remember this, and I have to be honest with you, I don't remember this on a day-to-day basis and have to be reminded. And I've said this before, I love Hank Moore, who works here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and he said once, and I hear it in my head all the time, we were talking about when a child is going through a difficult time and there's no compliance and the child is having tantrums that have sprung up someplace, or we're just seeing lots of new challenging behaviors from a child who was doing better. And Hank's thing is, how much are we praising? And you go, the child's not behaving. We're not praising, yeah. Except that these two things go hand in hand. We can choose to nag, and we can choose to be upset with the child's behavior. And of course, we're talking about kids that are older and that have had progress already in this case, and who've already had praise paired with a whole lot of other good stuff. But if we find the opportunity to praise anything and everything that they do, and if there isn't anything to praise, then we're going to make something up. We're going to say to the child, hey, could you go over and get your video game there and come over here and show me something on it, which you know perfectly well that they want to anyway. And then when they do, we give them a hug and say, oh my gosh, you are so smart. You are such a good boy. I dare you to try it today. It's amazing how it changes their whole body. And I am talking about kids on the autism spectrum. But of course, I'm talking about kids who praise has already been paired with things that they have found to be wonderful. But it changes their whole body, and then that changes our whole body and our whole way of looking things. So for those younger ones, we want to start with really basics. If you've got a child who's older and does not have functional communication skills, we can start on those earlier skills as well with something really simple. It doesn't have to be sit down or stand up. It can be something like touch your nose. You know, if you feel like it's just too baby for them to work on sit down and stand up, you can say touch your nose and praise that and work on compliance in that way. But for our kids who are older and do have receptive language, we can start with asking them to do something that they already want to do. And praise, 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 reward, party, lights on, party, party, party. When you have compliance, it's amazing how the day shifts. I challenge you, try it. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to talk about our executive functions tip for this week, which is about planning, asking our kids to plan. So stick with us. We're here today with Sarah Cho, who is the managing supervisor of the CARD Fresno office, and it's a special treat for us to have her with us today. Yeah. And we're going to be asking her to talk to us about working with children who are nonverbal. So when a child is not speaking, are we saying that they're non-vocal or non-verbal?
The correct terminology is non-vocal.
Okay.
Because when we're saying vocal means sound. So sound is being emitted.
Okay.
So verbal means that the child is able to communicate to another person that they need something, they have desires, they have wants, and a verbal response might be handing a picture.
Okay.
It might also be a sign. Might also be pressing a button to ask for something.
Okay.
Those would all be considered verbal behavior. But if they don't have speech, we might say that they're non-vocal. So imagine then if you have a child who's not developing speech typically, they have no way to tell their parent what they need, you're going to see frustration levels increase. And if I don't have a way to appropriately get my point across, I'm going to start developing some really bad excessive behaviors to communicate.
Right.
So that's when we start to see the noncompliance, the tantrums, the aggression, even self-injurious behaviors emerge. We're going to use really short and concise and clear speech. Pair it with a gesture. And then when the child starts responding, immediately praise, immediately give a reward. So then that way the child is starting to understand, I got it. I'm understanding what she's wanting me to do. At the same time as working on receptive instructions, we do need to teach the child also a way for them to communicate too. So we're going to start working on very basic requesting behavior. So they're able to request for things. And so the two kind of go hand in hand.
If there are no sounds, then maybe we start with signs.
You could start with signs, or you could start with an icon. As a parent, you're going to know your kid best in the sense that you're going to know kind of what they like. If you have a kiddo who likes to look at pictures, who likes to look at books, maybe an icon is going to be something that would be preferred, and they would get really good at giving it. If you have a child who is, you're like, wow, you know, they have really great fine motor. Maybe they can already string beads. Maybe they can do a shape sorter. You know, the ability to manipulate their hands and their fingers is pretty solid. Maybe you might want to work on some very basic signs.
Okay, so taking whatever the strength is and running with that.
Absolutely. So let's say that you do an icon or you do a sign. Both of those forms of communication have been linked to development of expressive speech. So, you know, if that's something that we're starting with today because we need to get through today, that doesn't mean that that's what we're going to end up doing tomorrow.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And it's that time of the week when I get to talk to you. I get to talk to you about executive functions. This is a really exciting area for me, and I have to say that my son, when he was having his early intervention from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, there were a whole host of lessons that they worked on. And when we would go to clinics and they would talk about the different lessons and they would say, okay, now we're progressing on to this. And I might as well have been, you know, like a horse with blinders on, because I didn't see the whole picture. I just didn't. And I guess I was so tired and so desperate that I didn't ask as many questions, or maybe I asked and they told me, but it didn't stick. I don't know. I was really tired. But I got to see it unfold in a way that I went, this is ingenious. This is so cool to see that arc of how ABA and putting together these different areas of lessons. But I also didn't have a sense that they were coming from these different areas. They were just a set of lessons, and I didn't realize that you could categorize them in different areas. So the first time that I ever really saw how they were categorized was when I saw the skills program, and all the lessons that my son had are in the skills program, but they're categorized into 8 different curricular areas. And then within those curricular areas, they have different domains and then tons and tons of lessons. And you know, it's a set of lessons that is so large you couldn't fit it on a bookcase. And the amount of books that you would have to go through to read, just to read the lessons, and not, you know, that's not even counting the research that's been done on the lessons and, you know, all the background from the lessons. It's just the pure lessons. It would be so much reading, there's no way you could do it. And more importantly, as a parent or as a teacher, you don't have time. You don't have time to read all of the lessons. You want to read the lessons that pertain to your individual child, right? But once I saw the skills program and got to tootle around in it, I became deeply, deeply curious, because I'm a curious person. And I could see some of the lessons that my son had worked on, and I got to see the lessons that he didn't work on as well. Because some of them he didn't need to, and some of them he hadn't gotten to yet, but I got a sense of the big picture, you guys. And I always like to share with you, because I think the big picture is so exciting that if everybody knew about the big picture, they would be excited too. So, and one of the areas that blew my mind was the executive functions curriculum. Because as I read through it, I was like, this is the best self-help book that's never been published. The lessons are all there, you know, so you could go on Skills and read through the lessons as a book, but it's amazing, and it's amazing for anyone. absolutely amazing for anyone, whether it is a child who's 2 years old and is on the autism spectrum, or I think, somebody who's about to be 50 and isn't on the autism spectrum. I just think it's an amazing set of lessons. So what is it? It is a course in being able to follow, how to be able to have a goal and all the things that you need to be able to do to achieve a goal, and to see if the goal is working. And if you think about it, you might think to yourself, okay, well, that's great for somebody who's 16 and very high functioning, right? I think we can all admit that that's a great thing for somebody who's 16 and high functioning, to be able to set goals and to be able to look at them and see, am I making progress? What do I need to do to get to the goal? But does this really apply to a 3-year-old who's nonverbal on the autism spectrum? And you know what? It does. Because there are things that we can teach that 3-year-old who does not yet have receptive and expressive language that are going to help them to get to be the 4-year-old who's doing the next step along the way, and the next thing and the next thing. So that it's like putting the puzzle pieces together, and a child can start wherever they are and get as far as they can in this lesson. Absolutely amazing. And there are things that we can work on with the much younger kids in this lesson that help prepare them. But one of the things I want to talk about today in particular, there's a whole section of the executive functions that talks about planning. And I will say this too, that for very little kids, we see that starting to address some of these things with visual planners is very effective, and in some cases can diminish challenging behaviors. So that if we have a visual planner for a child and we've got little pictures on it, whether they're actual photographs that you have taken of events and people in the child's life, and we have a little clock on it, even if the child doesn't know from a clock, but we have a little clock and we put it at 9 o'clock and we point to the clock and say at 9 o'clock, and there's the picture of the therapist that's coming to work with them. And then we put the clock at 10 o'clock and we show the little picture of going to the park. And then we put at noon and we have them eating lunch, a picture of them eating lunch. Is the child going to understand on the first time that you show to them what the clock is doing and what the different things are? No, but over time, the child begins to understand, okay, this is what I'm doing next. And so you don't have to put the clock on it. You can just say, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. Do they understand the first and then in the beginning? No, but they will if you keep doing it. And the child begins to understand, this is the progression of my day. This is what I get to do today. It's going to help them with transitions. And it actually gives them a sense of self, oh, I know what's coming, so that they can help to prepare themselves. I don't like to go through my day blindly and have no idea what's going to happen. Even if I'm on vacation and, somebody else has been doing the planning and the morning starts and I go, so what are we doing today? Or the night before I say, so what are we doing today? And I can't stand it when somebody says, oh, it's all going to be a surprise. Please don't do that to me. I like to know what's happening. And I think that most of us do. Every once in a while, maybe you want to take one day and just let somebody else lead you around. But after that, you're ready to, you say, no, I kind of want to do this, right? Or I want to know what's coming. I can't stand to drive in the car with the other person holding the directions and I say, what freeway do I get on next? And they're doling it out in little itty bitty, no, tell me where we're going. How many freeways do I have to, what exits am I getting off on? Clue me in. I want to be a participant in my life. Our kids, some of them really like it too. It gives them a sense of control. I know what's happening. I know what to expect. It's not all coming at me. So having a visual planner for a very small child can be very beneficial. But how about when kids get older? Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 habits of highly effective people. That's what it is. And he's somebody who's very big on planners. And, now in business, we have Outlook and everybody has their phones and we have planners and we have all these other things. Why is that? Because I think a great many people, maybe not everyone, but a great many people find that they get more done if there is a plan that is visible and that they can check things off and say, we got this done. What haven't I done? I can't remember everything. And even if it's just having a list to know I accomplished this or this is what I was supposed to accomplish, very, very helpful. My son just started 4th grade, and I'm so thrilled that on the first day, each one of the kids got a planner. I was so excited about this because we've always had to make a planner for him to say, you know, it's Tuesday, so this is what you have to do. This is the expectation. But he came home with a planner, and every day there's a part of class time where he has to write down in his planner what his homework is, and then he comes home with it, and you know, we work on it, and then he has to check off that he got it done. There's a place for him to stick it in the planner so that he takes out his planner first thing every morning on his desk, and he opens it up to show the teacher the work that is there. Oh my gosh, you guys. For a young guy on the autism spectrum in 4th grade to start to be able to get it, is he really good at it yet? We're, 5 days into school yet? No, he's not really good at it yet. And he's rebelling against it a little bit. It's not his favorite thing, but is it working? Yes. Is he getting better at it? Yes. Is this going to make a difference for 5th grade and 6th grade and junior high and high school and college? You betcha. You betcha it is. So having a planner, you know, deciding at what point, at what age, at what skill level, I think is key. Because if they had tried to have a planner that he checked off and did on his own in 1st grade, oh, no, that would have been a disaster. However, his 1st grade teacher had a visual planner up on the board that would say, you know, in the morning, the first thing that we do the flag salute, and then we do centers, and then we do recess, and she had all the pictures there so that he would know what time of day we're doing which thing. We can do this for our young kids who still have not gone to school that are at home, and we can build these lessons so that at some point, you know, we've got a college student who is able to achieve goals. So no matter where your child is on this spectrum, having a plan, allowing them to be a part of the plan, really beneficial for them. Okay, I've gone way over. I've just looked at the clock. It's terrifying how over I've gone. We're going to very quickly show you the A word. This week's episode of the A word. This is only the 2nd episode of the series. This is a documentary that's being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders that follows one little boy, Jack Riley. He was diagnosed at the age of 2. He is now 3 in real time. And he started his therapy at 2 with the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And in this episode that you'll see, they haven't actually started the therapy yet. They're in that really frustrating period of time after you've gotten your child diagnosed, after you've identified who your funding source is, after you've put in your paper to the funding source and you're waiting to have your funding so that you can start the first day a therapist coming to the door. And it's frustrating. It's really, really frustrating. I love this because we get to see from the parents what it is like for them and to acknowledge, oh, not just me. It's not just me who thought this period of time was really, really difficult and had some anger and some resentment about it. So take a look at this young family, the A word, and we'll talk about it when we come back. Don't forget that right around 10:20, we're a little bit over here, but right around 10:20, we're going to have Angela Persicke. So take a look at the A word.
Hey, can I have your hand? If everybody's agreed and held hands that early intervention is key, then I can't imagine why. If the original center knew on November 2nd that we didn't speak or make much noise at all during the evaluation, they knew that on that day. I can't comprehend for the life of me why we even take a month to start speech therapy. That doesn't make any sense to me.
The waiting's hard.
The waiting's really hard. We read things about how the brain is so much more valuable the younger they are. You know, every day that ticks by just seems like a waste of time. You know, you go on the websites and you read all these things, and there's kind of a club, I think, of moms who call themselves autism warriors. And I hated that word when I first read it. I hated it. I still do. Because I don't, you know, there's a lot of things I wanted to fight for, but I didn't really have to fight for autism.
Yeah. It's okay, man. we're lucky in that he sprints to mom.
Okay, this is how my son reacts to me coming home. Oh, Jack Riley. Hi! Mommy's home! Mommy's home! Hello!
When he sprints to me when I get home, and he kisses you and hugs you. Where's my son?
One of the first people that I told when we got the diagnosis was a good friend of mine who knew somebody who had an adopted son who has autism. And had not only fought the fight, I mean, talk about autism warrior, this woman founded a whole foundation and was extremely active and extremely knowledgeable, and my friend put me on the phone with her. She was the one who turned me on to both ABA and to CARD, and to tell me how valuable it was, and we're very grateful for it, because
Yes.
we realized that had we not been given information, we never would have known. The original center would not have recommended that for us. So it required us to really push to get what we wanted. And I didn't know even until I asked the question if I had a choice. I thought this was great advice. Don't ever feel that you're at the mercy of the regional center because they're paying for your services. She told me, you're paying for your services. They're using tax money to do this, and you've paid taxes. Intake at CARD was actually a much more pleasant experience than the regional center evaluation. I think in part because we'd been through it once and it wasn't as scary for us. It was a good experience for us because we felt like our son was himself. He had all the same things going on as far as autism is concerned, but he was still bright and happy and affectionate. I felt like he showed them both his good sides and the sides that he needs to work on. So for us it felt good because we felt like at least people were seeing what we see. I felt maybe for the first time that they got it, that it's like, okay, he is this way, this is what he's got going on, but we can make this better. At first it was exhausting to think that every single thing was a teaching moment, that every single thing that he did, and I know that, I would say something to him and he'd be like, really? Can we just feed him? Can we just feed him dinner and we don't have to worry about it? But now even that's not as exhausting because it's sort of starting to become more natural for us, so that it doesn't feel as awful.
But I remember feeling guilty just for being with him all day, and then, just sort of sneak the TV on to Sports Center in the afternoon, and he's playing with his Legos, and I just back up and lean against the sofa with him between my feet, but I wasn't really watching him. I would just try to watch Sports Center for a few minutes, and then I'd always feel guilty and try to get over that. So
no more guilt.
I think we're teammates. That's the best thing. Is I feel like she's on my side, I'm on her side.
We sort of, we've been lucky that my weak moments are his strong moments.
Well, on a personal note, is the camera still on?
It is.
On a personal note, I would be lost. She really dove in, and I mean, I've Googled autism, and I still don't understand it until she explained it to me.
Which is scary because I don't really understand it.
Well, that's the point, but she dives to the next step, and I'm just starting to understand the last step, and she's trying to explain the next step. And I told her last night I would be lost if she wasn't doing that, because I wouldn't, I don't think I could. Sometimes I'm reading these things and it just floats over me because I go numb again reading about it.
Well, I think in fairness, I think one person in each family has to take that role, because I don't think you can both drive. I think there's always somebody in every family who just takes that role.
Yeah. If somebody takes charge, take a back seat. That's the moral of that. Isn't that too?
Welcome back. That was the A Word. Really want to encourage you to go to their YouTube channel and watch this series. You can watch from the beginning. We've started over that we show one episode per week. So once a day we show an episode and then I talk about it because I just love it. in case we were wondering. I absolutely love this series for so many different reasons, but I want to encourage you to go and watch it on their YouTube channel too, because I don't know, if you're like me, sometimes I get impatient and I want to see the progress, I want to see what happens. So you can check that out on their YouTube page. But this particular episode of the A Word, when we're in this, nothingness, you now know what it is, right? It was hard for a while. You didn't know what the diagnosis was, but now you know it's the diagnosis of autism. And you went through all of that, and you're experiencing all the different emotions that come with that, and all of the different family things that are going on, both in the nuclear family and then the extended family, and all the things that your friends are saying. It's a difficult time, and you have to sort out what are you going to do, and everybody has to make choices in that period of time, and it weighs on you because you think, I don't know what's the best thing, and you consult with a lot of different people, and then you finally get to the point where you say, okay, I see how much progress there is to be had from ABA, and I totally want to get this, and I'm told that there's going to be some difficult things along this, and we're going to change the way we live for at least a couple of years and have a whole bunch of strangers in our house, but we're going to do this because it's the right thing to do, and we want this progress. And then once you've made all those tough decisions, then you basically have to sit on your hands for a period of time. And, I know that with funding sources and with ABA providers, that they're making the period of time shorter and shorter. I know that that's something that, CARD has worked so hard to make the period of time in which a family has to wait as short as possible. Sometimes the funding sources, though, there's nothing you can do about it. And certainly you don't want to complain overly much about that because they're making it possible for your child to get a great deal of ABA therapy. But there is paperwork to be filed. It's part of the reality of it, but it is, it's so hard, isn't it? And to hear this mom say, this is a little cruel that we're having to wait. How could you do that? And we talk about this window all the time. I get frustrated. There are times when I say, I wish they would just get rid of talking about the window. I wish they wouldn't talk about the window. I think it's important to talk about the window, but it's maddening for everyone, isn't it? And of course, if you're new to autism, the window that I'm talking about is studies have been done that show that if you can get early intervention as early as you can possibly intervene, that your possible outcomes, the percentage-wise of the outcomes, are much higher. That doesn't mean that you can't get to outcomes if your child is later, but the earlier you get there, the greater your odds are of getting the highest possible outcome that you would want to have. Now, for years, they were saying, that meant that, by the time the child was 4, you just had to start therapy by the time the child was 4, or you weren't going to get to the outcome that you most wanted, assuming that everybody knows exactly what that is. Then it was no, if you start by the time the child was 5. Then it was, well, if we start by the time of 6. Each year I feel like they've made it, the window gets more and more open, which is a great thing. But it is also, as I said, a maddening thing for the people who do get the early intervention, who heard the message of the urgency and found the right people to diagnose their child, found the right people to help them. They're sitting there going, okay, well then can we start? Can you hurry your funding thing up a little bit so that, because my window is closing and you feel the pressure of it. It's chest pain making, And for people who didn't have the benefit of hearing that intense message, the urgency, or took their child to a specialist and the specialist said, no, I don't think it's autism, or said, don't worry, go home and sit and wait and see what will happen. Oh, yeah. Right? Because I think everybody at some point has had some professional poo-poo them and say, you're needlessly worrying. Go home and waste 6 months before you come back and ask for something again. And really, that's hard too. But in any case, for the people who are coming in later and going, I missed the boat, my window is already closed, The great disservice to those people is that I don't think enough people are saying, no, 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 there's still progress. It just means you have that much more to catch up on, that much more to get done. You know, if we start a child when they're 2 and they're only a year behind, that's only a year we have to catch them up before we can be working on things that are happening now and helping the child to be able to do the skills that are age appropriate for them. We only have to get a year caught up, and we can get a year caught up. It's just that for some children, maybe it takes 6 months to get that year caught up, and for some children, that year might take 6 years to get caught up, depending on, you know, their learning rates and what their skill levels are. Now imagine if your child is 5 years behind. You know, it's going to take that much longer to get the child caught up. Again, it's going to depend on what their individual learning rates are and what their individual skills are, you know. So it really depends on the child. It's just that statistically, when we're looking at how much you have to get caught up, it's just going to take that much longer and be that much harder. But I say this time and time again, you know, it's so important that we not rule anybody out, that we not say, don't, you know, I always pictured this window and I could feel it closing. I literally could feel it closing. The window is big enough for everyone to make progress. So, you know, insofar as getting early help, concentrate on the window. But other than that, early, I think, means now. Now. Whether your child is 3, whether your child is 8, whether your child is 18, whether your child is 45, now is the best time to start. Okay, but in any case, the A word, watch, and you'll see that they do finally start therapy. We'll see that next week, that period of time does pass, and then you get into the work. And I do think the waiting is harder than the work, but the work is hard in and of itself. And we'll see that arc and see the amount of progress that Jack Riley makes, that he's catching up. It's a very exciting thing. Check it out on YouTube. We're going to take a break and bring in Angela Persicke. She's a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, and we're going to be talking about at least a little bit about bedtime rituals and perhaps about other things as well. Now's a great time for you to write in and tell us what kinds of things you'd like to be talking about. Stick with us.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development.
Currently, in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're going to take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah, Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Did you have some guesses?
Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
I have 2 children with autism. I can't imagine a day without CARD or the therapists. They've been so instrumental in helping us with our kids and shaping their lives and helping us help them.
Thank you, Christina, Big Alex.
Thank you, Jackie and Mariana.
We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable and recovery from autism is possible.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are so thrilled to be joined right now by the fabulous Angela Persicke. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst, and she joins us typically on Thursday, but we've been off a couple of weeks from having you in, so I want to welcome you back. And she's here a little bit earlier than usual today because she's got someplace she's got to be at 11 o'clock, but thank you for being flexible and coming in early. Problem. And I specifically asked Angela to come in today and talk with us a little bit. We had a question that came in about sleep and bedtime rituals that a mom had written in and said, you know, 4-year-old having a really tough time, 9-year-old, I have a tough time sometimes now, still, it's a rough time of day, and she was asking specifically about bedtime rituals, that she thinks she's got a bedtime ritual, but that it seems not to be working, and that her little guy wants to play endlessly, and that it ends up him having to be exhausted and cry himself to sleep, and that's not what she wants to have going on. So I thought it'd be great if you could talk to us a little bit about what we know about sleep and what we know about bedtime rituals, and fill us in, educate us.
Yes, definitely. Well, first to start out, many people with children with autism often think, the sleep problems are associated with autism. You know, that's my kid can't sleep because of this. You know, which that hasn't necessarily been proven anywhere. We have reports from parents of individuals with autism who report like that their child has sleep problems, and that's like 40, it's ranged from like 40 to 80% of parents report this.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, but those are you know, self-report, and maybe a lot of times it may have to do with the lack of communication skills on the part of the child. You know, like maybe there's the child wakes up but cannot communicate what he or she wants, you know. So it's not necessarily that it's the sleep that is affected. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And the objective measures that they've used have shown that compared to typical children, they fall asleep a little later once they get into bed, so latency to sleep is a little longer. They sleep not as well.
Okay.
And this is like a smaller study. Again, it hasn't been studied as much, but it's definitely a problem and a lot of factors involved. So if you are a parent of a child with autism, you're like, my kid doesn't sleep, you're not alone.
Okay.
So,
and that's a good thing to know. Although we don't, as you were saying when you started out, we don't see that it necessarily is something that happens with autism.
Yeah.
But 40 to 80%, that suggests that a lot of people are dealing with these kinds of issues and can use some information.
Exactly. And
so glad you're here.
And there has been a lot of studies using behavioral interventions for sleep problems for typical kids.
Okay.
But not as many for kids with autism, which is very interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The behavioral interventions have been used over and over again with typically developing children. They work really well, but for some reason, a lot of doctors will prescribe medications, you know, instead of suggesting that, okay, you know, there's these interventions that you can do. So it's really, it's very disheartening, and it's very interesting to us considering that, you know, most kids with autism are receiving behavioral therapy, and then maybe this doesn't come up because the parent doesn't communicate that the sleep problems are occurring. The therapist already is going to work with the kid on these specific skills, and maybe they're like, okay, well, we'll just focus on these and the sleep will come later. But there was also a study suggesting that parents with kids that have the sleep problems are more stressed. Of course, they aren't sleeping as well, and this affects the whole life and world of the family. You know?
Absolutely, because, you know, everything depends on whether you're rested.
Yeah.
Your ability to cope and their ability to cope depends on whether you're rested. So one of the first things that we can do if we've got a child, what I'm hearing, on the spectrum and we're having sleep issues, is if we're already doing ABA therapy, to bring that up to the child supervisor and say, by the way, we are having an issue with this because it's just another thing that can be targeted.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And like I said, a lot of the research has been done with typically developing children, but there's no reason why we can't use that for kids with autism. And
seems like a much better place to start than medication.
Oh yes, and obviously parents prefer their child to have a behavioral intervention over medicated to sleep. So.
Okay, great.
So there is help out there, and there have been quite a few studies. There's small single case studies, but that doesn't make them
invalid.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
That's what we do, but no, there hasn't been really any large scale controlled trials of these interventions. But starting with the bedtime routine, very important. To set up a bedtime routine, to make sure the child isn't engaged in some very active activity before bedtime, you know, a couple hours after dinner, but also varying that routine a little bit so the child doesn't get stuck in a pattern of only doing the same thing over and over. Changing the pajamas, changing you know, the stories that are read to the child. But the bedtime routine is very important, and the research shows that that will definitely help the child get into sleep mode, you know, like, okay, it's time to transition into quiet time, sleep time. Bedtime.
I have a question for you, because this is one of the things that I was talking about the other day when with my son, I thought we had a bedtime ritual, and it wasn't working at all. And it degraded into the bedtime ritual was us driving him around the block for hours on end in the middle of the night. Terrible. But and I had tried a couple of times other bedtime rituals that didn't seem to work. But when we started ABA, the thing that was said to me was that my idea of the bedtime ritual was about a half an hour or 45 minutes right before bedtime, and I was told, oh no, that I needed to move that clock way back and start much earlier. Is there anything that we know? Is that just my kid, or is that a lot of kids?
No, that's it's really about creating this routine of quieting down. This is the time to do that. And so, you know, after dinner even, you don't want to have the child playing, you know, tag with his brother and sister, running all over the house and that kind of thing. And also, you have to remember, when you say time for bed, if the child is engaged in something super fun, like playing with his toys, we were talking about this earlier,
why would they want to?
Of course, the child isn't going to want to stop. So you have to make something about the bedtime routine fun.
Okay.
And you know, even reading books or whatever it is that the child likes, you have to transition that into the bedtime routine as well.
Okay.
So do these things, get ready for bed, and then you know, you will get to read your favorite book or listen to this song. You know, something like that.
And you know, different things for different kids, I would imagine. Like some kids love to be snuggled and held and all of that, you know, very quiet time, and other kids, that's aversive to them. So figuring, you know, gauging it on what is really exciting to them, and I use the wrong word, what's reinforcing to them but not exciting to them, because we don't want to be exciting them, we want to be mellowing them out, but having it be reinforcing to them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So the bedtime routine is very important.
Okay. And any suggestions about what the bedtime routine, it's really got to be individualized, right?
Yeah, it's very individualized. There has been some research showing that if you're just starting this, try to take data, pay attention to...
She's laughing because I said during the break that I am the worst parent at taking data, especially when it's something that's happening. I was sharing with them, it's the worst time of day for me because I'm tired. And so my ability to cope is just, it's not what I would like for it to be, let's say that. And I think it makes it easier for my child to get away with things. And then when you say to me as a parent, take data on it, and I'm like, I'm tired. I'll say to you at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, oh, I'd love to take data on that. That's wonderful. And then, you know, it's 10:15 and he's still not asleep, and I'm like, and the data's not very good, oddly enough. Or it doesn't happen.
And this is where your supervisor, if you have a behavioral intervention program, can make it easier for you, because our job is to make sure everyone is successful.
There we go.
And the parents are the clients too, you know, so we have to make it work for you as well. So talk to your supervisor about that. But just pay attention to when the child naturally falls asleep. You know, at what point is the child, you know, starting to doze off?
What point do they give up?
Exactly. And not necessarily, this is when you're first starting out, if you don't have a bedtime routine, or maybe on a weekend during the summer when the child's not in school. What time does the child get tired and actually fall asleep? And what the research suggests is find that time and then slowly increasing 15 minutes earlier. So every night, 15 minutes earlier, and then and if your bedtime routine take, you know, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, start that 15 minutes earlier, and then the child gets in bed 15 minutes earlier, and you'll slowly see that you can get the child to a point where they're getting in bed at their bedtime.
I would imagine that we don't tell them that we're moving it back 15 minutes. So that's just our information and not for them. And by doing it 15 minutes, I know that feels like a crawl, especially if your child's going to bed at 11:30. And my child, when we started out, it was 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, 15 minutes, I would have said at that time, he'll be in college before I get him in bed at a regular time. But 15 minutes over a period of time can give you success.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, even 4 days, that's an hour earlier.
Which is amazing when you put it that way. But I know you say to a parent, 15 minutes.
And maybe you have to start it at 10 minutes earlier if your child is very, very resistant to it.
And maybe you have to do that 10-minute time for a couple of days before you move it another 10 minutes. Baby steps. baby steps. But
and
it adds up.
You want to see success before, of course, you move on to the next step.
Okay. So if you move it 10 minutes, the child has to go to sleep at that 10-minute time before you move it another 10 minutes or another 15 minutes.
And, and you may even be talking about just getting the child into bed if that's a struggle. So even getting the child into bed 10, 15 minutes earlier, that's helpful.
And how do we work on if getting into bed is aversive, which, you know, it is for some kids, how do we work on, you were saying, you know, make it more fun. What are some suggestions to be able to make it, you know?
More fun, not playing and exciting.
Right, I keep going there. It's not exciting, but making it more reinforcing.
And we talk about more fun during therapy and everything to engage the child, but maybe a new toy. I saw those really great stuffed animals that have the lights.
The light, yeah.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah.
Those are great, and they play some music and everything, and maybe that's a toy that the child only gets once he or she is in bed.
Great idea. And they have all those pillow pets that turn into things. It's a pillow, it's a pet, it's a dishwasher. I don't know what all it is. And and some of those, now they have the ones that, the animals that light up that can go in the bed, but they had, before they had the ones that make the projections on the ceiling. Now they have the light up pillows.
And they change colors and they're
so
great.
Much stuff.
But you want to make sure that the toy or whatever it is, music, the bedtime music or toy is only available once the child gets into bed.
Right, and a lot of people do that with the binky, with the pacifier. When you're weaning off the pacifier, the only time that the child can have it is right when they're going to bed, which makes bedtime not the big hysterical thing.
And
interesting.
Limiting TV or video games, of course, before bedtime too, because you know, a child, if there's a good movie on, the child will just sit there and watch it all night long.
Us, like how we do that. I'm way tired, but I just have to watch the end of this movie. That stands to reason. Okay, and also making sure that I imagine the kinds of foods that they eat, that we're not setting them up for, you know, if a whole bunch of sugar and things like that, or even fruit before bedtime, so that the kids are a little zippy. We don't want to do that either. Okay, so setting ourselves up for success, setting them up for success. If we don't have the supervisor who can help us to take the data, what are some suggestions for us, for people like me that are just hopeless?
Well, I would suggest one of those great dry erase boards, right? Maybe sticking it on the child's bedroom door.
Okay.
And you could just put a timer on top of it, so you see the time right there. It's low effort, and you just or even put a list of times printed out on a piece of paper and just circle it.
Okay, there's a good idea. So you don't have to think about it too much. Because literally at that time of night, I can't think. So that's a great idea. Wonderful.
Make it as easy for you as possible. So that's the point, making it less effortful so you can actually be successful.
There you go. All right, that's a great time for us to take a break. We're going to come back in just a minute with more with Angela Persicke. If you have questions, now is a great time to be asking, whether it's about bedtime rituals or other things. Stick with us.
While there are some children that have feeding problems and no other issues, there are also children that have medical problems that are comorbid with their feeding issues. So they may have esophageal reflux, they may have food allergies, they may have a variety of different things that impact feeding. And for that, it's not only the behavior analyst that is required to help the child, but other members of the medical community as well. One of the things you would want to look at is the range of the child's diet. And is that diet, does it possibly impact their health? A number of the kids that we see do have anemia from not taking in enough iron. A number of the kids that we see are deficient in various micronutrients. So it is does the diet impact their health? And two, is there social ramifications from their feeding problem? In some cases, families can't go out to eat. They can't go to different places because their child's either diet is so limited or their feeding behavior is so limited that affects the family and it affects the child. If you look at the literature, behavioral interventions have been widely used to treat childhood feeding problems, and especially in kids with autism spectrum disorders. At our facility and a number of other places as well, we regularly succeed at getting kids with feeding problems to eat a wider variety of foods.
If there's somebody who has a child and they see that they've got an issue and they want to get some help, how can they contact your program?
We have our email address is feedingprogram@hmc.psu.edu. And certainly we're glad to talk to anyone, but I don't want them to think that we're the only ones out there. There's a lot of feeding programs, and there's a lot of behavior analysts that are very good at this. And if they're working with a behavior analyst already, a lot of the things that they're probably in the child's current program could be adapted to work on feeding. We just apply behavior analysis to feeding. We don't have a separate skill set. We just apply it to this particular area.
There we go. Welcome back. We are here right now with Angela Persicke, a BCBA board-certified behavior analyst, and she has been talking to us about bedtime rituals and sleep. And one of the things that the mom, that I forgot to mention, the mom wrote in the other day, she said, when it's time, we do the bedtime ritual, and my child goes to bed, and my child says, 5 more minutes. Over and over and over again, and she'll give him 5 minutes, and then he wants 5 more minutes. And I said, how great, that we have that functional communication, that they can ask for 5 more minutes, but we have to put a stop to it. And I was saying during the break that my son, I'll pick him up from school and I'll say, so what happened at school today? And he's like, oh, nothing. Right now he's making him tell me a couple of things, but suddenly when it's bedtime and he's gone to bed and I've come downstairs, then I hear the pum 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 pum, the pitter patter of the feet on the stairs, and he goes, Mom, I just remembered something really important I wanted to tell you about that happened in school today, over and over and over again. Or, oh, I just remembered something that you wanted to talk about, Mom. He wants to chat, and he's always got a really logical reason why it really is appropriate to talk about it right now. This makes me nuts because I'm already tired and I'm not in the coping mood with it. So when our kids just keep asking for more or having excuses, well, I just need a drink of water, I just need to go to the bathroom. Why are you overreacting to the fact that I need to go to the bathroom? What kinds of things can we do about that?
Yes. Well, first of all, again, it's important to have this routine and maybe include in the routine, okay, so let's talk about your day, and have that conversation before, make sure they go to the bathroom, everything, so they don't actually need anything, that they're just trying to get out of going to sleep,
Angela, that is such a duh. Like, you say that and I go, well, of course, but I don't think of that. I literally don't think of that.
Yeah, it's most people don't. It's not
just me. Okay.
But we have this really great study that was done with typically developing children. It's called the Bedtime Pass. And the author of this was Pat Fryman, and he's done a lot of work in this area. And what he did is, it's like coupons.
Okay.
So you see during baseline, beforehand, before any intervention, how often the kid is asking for things or getting out of bed, needing to get water, go to the bathroom, anything like that. You see how many times, and then you give them a certain amount of coupons that is less than that. So if they ask 5 times, you give them 3 coupons. You say you can use these coupons for anything you want, but once they're gone, they're done.
Okay.
And this is where it's very important for the parent to be consistent, and once the coupons are gone, nothing else, no interactions, just ignore. And so that's why we put it on extinction, and we say this. And this is better than just putting the whole bedtime catastrophe on extinction, because you'll see an extinction burst often. Like, the child will cry and scream, and that's tough for a parent to sit there and do. But if the child has these coupons that they can use, bedtime passes, what we call them, they can say, okay, this is for my water. This is for this. This is for this, and then they're done. And what we see is, you start to reduce those. It goes down to 2 and then 1. But what we see is the kids actually fade out the coupons themselves because they want to save them just in case. So
that's clever.
You'll see the child say, like, okay, I'm not going to use this one. I want to save it just in case. Like, what if I need something, and then I won't have any more coupons. I won't be able to get anything. So this has worked with typical kids, and we started replicating this with kids with autism. The first participant worked wonderfully.
Okay.
Great. He would save his coupons. He wouldn't even use them all. Started going to bed. The parents loved it, and we haven't heard any problems since.
Okay. Now, when we institute this with our child and we say, okay, and we've done, I think what I'm hearing here is that the baseline is the most important thing, because if they get up 5 times, typically we're going to give them 5 coupons.
Or less.
Or 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're setting ourselves up for as much success as possible.
Exactly.
But what happens when they're out of coupons and if they're still getting up? Do we say to them there's a consequence for if you get up after the, because we don't typically work in terms of punishment, but are we offering them some sort of reward for only sticking to those, or does it depend on the child?
It definitely depends on the child, and we want to avoid punishment at all costs. But sometimes we use response costs, like you'll lose this if you if you don't get it. But for the most part, we want to give a huge reinforcer probably the next morning even if the child doesn't use more than his coupons or get up more than his coupons. So like, you have this many, you can do what you want with them, and then if you don't get up after this or don't bother me after this, you can get this great reward.
Okay, great. We've got our first question here. I want to show it to everybody. If my child is using a communication device, is it okay to use their communication device at bedtime? This is a great question because we want to be bringing it down during that time, but if they need the device to communicate, I would imagine case by case with a child. But what do you think, Angela?
Well, I know a lot of kids that use iPads to communicate, but of course the iPads have games on them too.
Yes.
So you want to make sure the child is able to use that device to communicate his or her needs.
Okay.
But of course, if he's just playing games on it.
Okay, good point.
That will definitely interfere with the bedtime routine.
So setting down the rules that, your device is here to be used for communication, but, no games on it or whatever the thing is that you're doing. We don't have an iPad. We haven't branched to an iPad thing, but I know that there are some parental controls. Are there, I don't know if there are ways that you can say after a certain time, because we do that on our computer at home, on the big computer, that there is a time so that I don't have to be in charge of it. I set the timer, and there is a period of time at which the games no longer work.
Yeah,
I would imagine there's something like that.
Sure. I haven't seen that, but I bet there is something, or a folder that you could lock.
Yeah, like I think there's parental controls.
Yeah.
That's what it is on our computer, on our PC
I'm not
at home.
positive about that, though. But even taking the communication device and putting it, maybe in...
By the bedside?
Yeah, by the bedside or in a different place, or even, in the parents' bedroom, in your bedroom. And the child would have to go in there, but if you're using the bedtime pass and you have your coupons, they can come in, give the pass, take the communication device, ask for water, ask for something.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Instead of just having it available at all times, so the child in their room is just
it's temptation.
Exactly.
Okay, great question though, and feel free to write in more. And if you know if there's a way on an iPad to set it up so that it turns off games but not everything, let us know, because I would be interested to know that. Okay. All right, we got another question here. Okay, here. And I don't know. It says, hi, does anyone know of a CD player that doesn't have a repeat button or fast forward button? My son drives me nuts repeating. I don't, that's something I'm going to have to look into.
Oh, yeah.
But I would think, though, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a way in which you could offer tokens for not touching the fast forward or repeat button. So that even if you couldn't find a CD player, that you could go through with your child and paint those a certain color and say, if you go 5 minutes without touching it, then you get this. And have, tokens for every minute or something like that.
Completely.
To change the behavior so you don't have to get a whole new device.
Or setting it up like if you're playing it on a computer or something, or if it's just a CD player, putting it high up, so the child can't even get to it, you know. So I mean,
depends on the age.
Yeah, of course it does, and what they're actually listening to and using that for.
Right.
But if you just want the music to play and the child not to have access to it, just put it in a high place. Or I know a lot of times you can use the like your DVD player for this too, and it's probably in a cupboard somewhere or something, so the child can't always get to it. So
yeah, there's a whole bunch of different things to child-proof different devices for different reasons. And for those of us who have kids on the autism spectrum, it's, you know, it's an interesting sort of conundrum, because your child you know, when they make those devices for little kids who have little fingers who can't figure things out. Sometimes our kids on the autism spectrum are very good at figuring those things out. My son was able to break the code on the locks on the doors for the child protective locks before I could or the therapist could. I would be standing there trying to pinch the thing and move it, and I couldn't do it, and my son would reach up and go foomp, and he would open the door, and it was a child protective lock. But you can get really creative. We eventually, you know, for our VCR, because my son would push the buttons and make things rewind and did all kinds of things, we had somebody gave us plexiglass book or their picture holders. So you put it in, instead of putting a picture in it, you pushed it in underneath the VCR, so the plexiglass covered it. He couldn't touch the buttons, the remote still worked. And we had to put 2 of them in, and that's a great idea, because it was so simplistic, that he couldn't figure out. You know, for a while. And then of course he realized, oh, all I have to do is pull these things out. But it got us a good 6 months of progress, where then we could say to him, don't touch it or the TV goes off. And then he could understand it, but when he was little, we couldn't get that.
Or so if you're using, you know, an iPhone or a phone to play the music, or iPads or iPods, you can lock them, you know, and if it's a code lock, the child won't know the code. I know they have a way of doing that, so you can play it on there, and then just child can't figure out the code to go to the next one.
Right. Fascinating. So things to be considered, but I'm not aware of an actual device that doesn't have a repeat button or a fast forward button.
I think you just have to be
everybody
creative.
would have that. And depending on how old your child is and what their skills are, to figure out how you're going to address it, whether it's worth it to target the behavior or just move it higher. And it might matter depending on, you know, what you're using it for. And I see somebody says, let's invent one. Let's invent one that, you know, and I would look online. I would Google that to see if somebody has a child lock CD player, because maybe, or even if there's an app. You know, if there's an app on something like an iPad that allows you to lock the fast forward and put in a code so that you can unlock it for your use.
There has to be something
and if there
like
isn't, maybe that's what you should invent.
Yeah, there you go. Make a lot of money.
Yes, there you go. Ideas. Okay, so we were talking about that when kids, this bedtime pass, and I'm sure that there's lots of different ways that they can create a bedtime pass or use, you know, different tokens, and some people even have token economy things on their phones, but it sounds like it would be best if it's something that the child has.
Yes.
And
they have and can actually give it to you and turn it in for something, exchange it. Of course, you want to make it so the kid can't counterfeit it and make a bunch of passes of their own. But of course, you're going to be monitoring this, and if all of a sudden there are 8 more receipts or tokens or coupons,
Well, you know, last week we made a token economy here on the show for my son to go off to school, and maybe what I'll do is, and I made it available if people wanted to, for free, they could get the PDF of it to make their own and customize it on their own, but the basics of it, maybe we'll have to do that too, is make like a bedtime pass that you guys can download if you want, and color it how you want, or print it on the paper that you want, and get creative with it, but the format of it, so that and the kids won't be able to counterfeit that. We're always 3 steps ahead of them, thinking. Okay, so anything else in terms of the bedtime pass, because I sidetracked us with the question.
No, I think that's really it for the bedtime pass, and of course reinforcers, always include reinforcers. So like we said, if the child uses the passes or doesn't even use the passes and sleeps through the night, doesn't awake you, and definitely reinforce that.
Reinforce it. Yeah, that's a great thing. And I see that we're out of time, that we need to let you go to your meeting, but Angela, it's so great to have you back. This is so helpful. I want to remind everybody, if you have questions after the fact for Angela, you can write them in at any time during the week, whether you're writing it on our email or on the live forum here, and just make sure that you mark it and say, I have a question for Angela Persicke, and we'll make sure that we get those questions to her and we can address them next week when you're back. So that'll be wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be back in just a few minutes, so stick with us.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz. And once you pass that quiz, you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Now I remember. Emily was just saying something to me, and yes, that was what I was going to do. See how I forget things? She was reminding me that for my son, who has issues and always wants to come downstairs and tell me stuff, that I was going to put a book, a pad of paper next to his bedside table so that he could write down what it was that he wanted to tell me. That's exactly what I said I was going to do. But you see what happens at nighttime? I cannot remember. But that's exactly what I was going to do. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, we had another question right as we went to break, and I wanted to take a minute just to talk about this because we had this question about a week ago too. Somebody said, does anyone know anything about the benefits of probiotics for our kids? And I am not aware of studies, although there may be, that show specifically for kids on the autism spectrum the effect of probiotics. But I will say that in a larger sense, I'm aware of studies, and we're bombarded on the television constantly with products and things and pediatricians. I mean, turn on just about any show that's got a pediatrician or even a regular gastroenterologist on any show lately, and they talk about the benefits of probiotics for all of us. I mean, it's something, there's been a bit of a revolution that you can go into just about any store now. You can, any mainstream store, and you're going to see probiotic items on the shelf, and they put it on the packaging and say probiotic benefits of, things like yogurt, and they're putting it in different items that people eat and consume. Probiotic. So I think that it's pretty widespread and acknowledged that probiotics have a benefit for all of us in general. And in terms of, and I'll have to look and see if there are specific studies about kids with on the autism spectrum, but I will say that I think that the autism community was a little bit ahead of the curve here on the probiotics, because in taking our children, how important it is for us to take our children to doctors and to have our children be healthy. And I don't know very many autism parents who aren't really concerned with that. How do I have the healthiest possible child? I mean, all parents are interested in having healthy children, but when there are aspects of your child that are either immune compromised or your child is having difficulty with learning, you start to look at the bigger picture, I think, in a lot of cases, and get really concerned with making your child as healthy as possible. I know somebody explained it to me early on and said, hey, when you're not feeling well, how much more difficulty do you have learning something that's new and difficult? I think it's a no-brainer for most of us that if you're not feeling well, whether it's if you have a headache or if you have a stomach ache or your foot hurts or your leg hurts or you have a cramp in your hand, it pulls focus away from what you'd like to be concentrating on. And when you stack those things up, right, I know that there have been days when I just have said, okay, I just don't feel well enough to do the thing that I need to do, whether it's flu or a cold or whatever, because you're being bombarded by all of these different things. And our kids already have different things that they're trying to get through, whether it's that the clock on the wall is ticking and they're hearing the ticking sound and they're not able to edit it out of their head, or just that their skin is extra sensitive. They've got all these sensory issues, and then on top of that, if they're in some way, in any way, not feeling well, we're setting them up for circumstances where they're not going to have as much success or any success. So having our kids be healthy, and especially having their digestive systems be healthy, I think it's of paramount importance to all parents, and that much more for those of us who have kids on the autism spectrum. And I was hearing parents talking about the benefits of probiotic in the autism community before they were ever showing commercials saying that this is really great for all of us. I was recently talking with a member of my family that I've been saying for a couple of years. I was saying, maybe you should try a probiotic. Maybe this would help you with some of the things that you have going on. And their whole thing was, oh, you crazy autism people, that, all these things that you're into. And I was like, no, this is really pretty mainstream. And there's commercials about it. This is not some sort of, I don't know what. But in any case, you know, I think that it's something that I think is good, and I think that the studies have shown it's good for the whole family. You know, something to consider. I think you might want to talk to your physician about what kind of probiotic that would be good for your child, because there are some that are tailored specifically to children, and they have different strengths. And I think that that's the key question that you want to be asking your doctor about: which probiotic, not if probiotic. But you know, I am not a physician nor an expert on probiotics, and but I think if you go to a doctor and talk about it, you know, it's a pretty widespread thing right now. And I'll look into it to see if there's any studies specifically about probiotics with our individual kids. And I really appreciate the question, because not everybody knows about the probiotics. And I personally take a probiotic, and I can speak to the fact that my tummy feels better. And that helps me to concentrate better. Okay, then we have another question. Have I spoken to my child's class about his diagnosis? And if so, how did my son react? You know, this is a really personal thing that I think we always talk about child specific, right? That when we do interventions, and there's no cookie cutter. And I think it's the same thing when we're talking about these things. So I'm happy to tell you about what I did with my child, but I think you really have to follow your gut and look at your individual child to see what's right for you. But with our child, through some of the different circumstances that we went through early on, we made the decision, my husband and I, and it was my feeling that we were going to be as open as possible with everyone, including our child, about his diagnosis. So we used the word autism and has autism right out the gate and set it in front of him, and that was always the tack that we took. And when he was in kindergarten, he and I sat down together, and I had him write some things with me at that point, because he wasn't writing at that point, but he was talking at that point. We talked about things, and I sort of built a story that was, my name is Jem, I have autism. And I took a bunch of pictures, and I love to have a little craft project to do from time to time. I took a bunch of pictures and put them together in a digital scrapbooking program and put together a book. And my intent really was to have a way of discussing it with him that I felt empowered him and empowered me and empowered my husband, because I wanted him to know that he had autism, and that meant that he was different, and that being different was a great thing, and that there was nothing wrong about it, that it was kind of cool, and that autism wasn't the only thing that he had. That was the tack that we were taking with it. And so, you know, it's one of those things where it says, my name is Jem and I have autism, but it's not the only thing I have. I have brown hair, and I have a Lego Star Wars video game, and I have a mom, and I have a dad, and I have friends, and I have teachers, and I have a classroom, and it goes through a whole bunch of different things, and then talks a little bit about how he's different. And again, my intent was for this to be for he and I, and for my husband and I, to share with him, to help him have a roadmap for him to understand. And he loved it. And it was just one of those things, and we would talk about it. And then it was World Autism Awareness Day, and I decided and had some kind. Now he was 5, and so, you know, I talked to him about it and asked him how he felt about it. Would he like to read it to his class? And he said yes. If he had said no, I wouldn't have done it. But I also had to consider whether I thought it was a good idea before we did it, right? Because I don't know at 5 if he knows the full implications of it. But we went in on World Autism Awareness Day, and we brought a pin for each and every child that was the puzzle piece ribbon. It was Velcro, so we weren't dealing with safety pins in kindergarten, that they could Velcro it onto themselves. And we sat, he and I, together, and we read the book, and he showed the pictures of himself. And that was how we did that in kindergarten. Now, since then, and he goes to a school where he cycles in and out of having people in his class. We've not gone back and read the book since then. I don't think. I'm checking my memory. I don't think we've gone back in and read the book, but he uses the word autism. And when he talks to people, and he, last year in class, the teacher had a panicky moment because, you know, we've been out there about that, and my son's been on the news, and, you know, he's been featured in a couple of different things, which, by the way, he thinks is awesome. He just thinks that's the best thing ever. So we've never been shy about it, but it doesn't come up all the time anymore. And so last year in 3rd grade, I came to pick him up one day at the gate, and the teacher said, I got to talk to you. I got to pull you to the side and talk to you. And she said, you know, today in class, we were having a discussion about feelings and things that are hard. And one of the little boys in the class had just gone through something kind of devastating recently, and so they were helping this little boy to talk about his feelings, and I guess he was moving away. I think somebody had died close in the family, and he was moving away, and so they were giving him a forum in which to talk about it in the class. And he said, you know, this is really hard for me, and I'm going to miss all of you. And I think the school psychologist was even there in the class with it. I don't mean to laugh because it was a very serious thing. But then they opened it up for discussion for the other kids and said, would anybody else like to share something that's difficult that they've gotten through? And of course, my son's hand shot up, and he said, well, you know, I have autism, and sometimes there's some stuff that's really difficult for me, and sometimes I get really frustrated. And they didn't know whether it was okay for him to disclose it in the class, whether we were trying to keep it a secret. It just had never come up. And so they were trying to get him to settle down and be quiet about it. And he was like, no, I'm talking about this. I had autism, and I have autism, and it's, you know, it's a difficult thing, and I'm working through some stuff here. And the teacher said, was that okay? I think, you know, he may have disclosed that to the entire class. And I said, yeah, no, he's allowed to talk about it. And I appreciated that she was so concerned about it, because that may not have been the case for every child or every parent, that they would want people to know. But that is how we deal with it. That's how we've chosen to deal with it. And I've shared before that, you know, there are times where I have felt the sting of it, and there are times when I thought, ooh, man, did I make the right choice? I'm going to be really, really honest about that, because when you're out there and you've let everybody know, you can't always take it back. And there are times when it will, as my mother would say, bite you on the behind. You know, so know that when you disclose to your child, and when you disclose to your child's class, that's, once it's there, and you can't take it back. But I do think that was right in toto. I think it was right for our individual child. And I have seen some other cases with other parents where they have said, I don't think it's right for our child. And I really defer to a parent's gut on this, that it's up to you, and think about the repercussions of what happens. People do treat your child differently. I wish that wasn't the case. And I am proud of the fact that my son is able and is outspoken and advocates for himself. One of the news stories that we did way back when, the news reporter said, you know, this is Shannon, and her son Jem is autistic. And Jem stood up and he said, I am not autistic. I have autism. Doesn't this guy know what he's talking about? And I explained to him that there are a lot of people in the autism spectrum who don't like to say that they have autism. They like to refer to themselves as autistic. And he said, well, I'm not. I have autism, but it's not the only thing about me. And, you know, quite honestly, that was how I raised him. That was our choice. And I firmly believe that on this journey, everybody gets to have a choice, and of how they decide to look at this. And what's right for you in your gut is more than likely what's going to be right for your child. So, you know, I think if I were to go in now with the book, I I don't know. I'll ask my son if that would make him nervous or unhappy, or, you know, now he's in this phase where he wants everybody to know how much he's capable of, because he has felt the sting of sometimes people thinking because he has autism that there is stuff he can't do. And he doesn't look at it that way. He thinks, you know, there are some things he's working through, but that doesn't mean he can't do it, and that he can do a whole bunch more. Then, you know, so I don't know. I'll have to ask him how he would feel about it now. I have a feeling he would say now, no, I don't want you to go in and read that book to them. But I'll ask him and I'll get back to you guys on that. But again, take your child, take a measure of your gut and your child, and I think that you'll know what's right and when it's right, and if it's right. And then you'll probably second guess yourself, but you're probably right, whatever the first instinct was. All right, we have to take a break. We're going to come back and look at your answers, to the question of the day, which was, what's the hardest time of day for you? And does it coincide with your child's challenging behaviors? Stick with us.
We were supporting children with ASD and their families and providing mainly home-based intervention. But then what we noticed is that many of our families struggled with finding an appropriate preschool for their children. So we thought, why not start our own? And what it is it's a program for typically developing children. And we have 30 children in the program, but we reserve 8 spots for children with ASD. And our typical kids attend full-time Monday to Friday, but our children with ASD attend part day, so 4 hours, 5 days a week, and receive all their intervention in a classroom-based setting. Well, what are some characteristics of teachers that, you know, a good match with inclusive classroom? And we selected teachers who are flexible in their philosophy, who understand and are in agreement that not all children learn in the same way, and that they need to adjust their teaching style to match their learning needs. So once we selected our teachers, then the training process started. We've seen great results with our teachers. What we saw is that they developed a great interest in learners with ASD and in applied behavior analysis altogether. They came from different backgrounds, early childhood education. They weren't exposed to those teaching techniques, but they quickly realized that those techniques work.
I would imagine that you're seeing some pluses for both the neurotypical kids and the children on the autism spectrum.
So far, what we've seen, because we did have our graduates and they did transition to kindergartens, it really depends on how good of a job the school does maintaining their skills that we teach them. And we had situations where it did work great, and we work collaboratively with the school, and they are able to maintain and continue the teaching that we've started.
Welcome back. I want to address your answers to the question of the day, but we had another question that came in during the break. I want to put that up on the screen for you guys. The question was, do I have a favorite published book to read to his class? I have not gone back. I'm assuming that you mean a book about autism, because I love to go in and read to the class different things that don't have anything to do per se with autism. If we're just talking about that, my favorite book of all to go into any class and read is the book about, it's the Dr. Seuss book, and it comes together, The Sneetches. Which actually, I think that it does have a little bit to do with being different. And of course, the Pale Green Pair of Pants. Oh my goodness, I just love to read the Pale Green Pair of Pants to any class. But the Sneetches, and I suppose as my child gets older, I'm going to have to pick other things. But the Sneetches is all about being different and looking at other people and thinking you're better because you're different, and how ridiculous that is. Told through Dr. Seuss ease. Absolutely love that. But I'm assuming that your question is about autism. And I've never gone in and read any other book about autism other than the one that Jem and I wrote together. But if I were going to go in and read a book that somebody else wrote, I would for sure go in and read My Brother Charlie, which is Holly Robinson Pete's book that she wrote with her daughter. She had twins, a daughter and a son, and she and her daughter sat down and wrote this children's book together, My Brother Charlie, which is really lovely and I think helps neurotypical children to gain an understanding and have an idea of what it's like to have a sibling and what it's like to be friends with somebody who's different. And I mentioned this the other day, and I've Googled it a little bit, and I'm having trouble finding the answer to the question, but when Danny Bowman was with us a couple of weeks ago, she's the young woman who's 17 years old on the autism spectrum, has her own film company, is an animator, has 2 children's books that are published about bullying, which are lovely to take into a classroom and read. They're not about autism per se, but about being different. And so Danny's pretty awesome, and her aunt was talking about what she read with Danny to talk to Danny about her autism, and it was a book called Charlie. And we said, now it's not your brother Charlie. She said, no, it's just a book called Charlie. And I'm having difficulty finding it online, so I'm going to contact her aunt. There is a book, but I don't think it's the one because she said it was just called Charlie. But there is a book called Charlie, Perks of Being a Wallflower, and they're saying online, is that a book about being somebody on the autism spectrum? So I don't think that that is the one. And the aunt was saying that in the book, it's a grandfather explaining to the grandson, that he has autism. So I have to do some more research on that and ask Danny's aunt who wrote that book so that we can get our hands on it, because I want to read it with my son. But I hope that answers your question. If I were going to go into a classroom and read a book, I would definitely go in and read My Brother Charlie. It's a great book. Holly Robinson Peete and her daughter did a wonderful, wonderful job, I think, of writing a book that's easily understood by school-age children, and getting a beginning awareness of autism and what it is, and the fact that we're all different and that we can be helpful and useful to other kids. Okay, so let's take a look. I love some of the things that you guys wrote into the question of the day. The question of the day is, what's the hardest time of the day for you? Is it harder because of your child's challenging behavior? I'm seeing right off the top that we've got some bedtime things here. I hope that you guys had an opportunity to see Angela Persicke, who just barely left the studio, talking about the bedtime ritual. Because here we have somebody who said bedtime. I said that was my answer to it, right? I'm just seeing, okay, somebody wrote in, and this is a valid comment. Somebody said, did you ever notice how this entire page is directed at the parents of children with autism rather than being directed at parents, siblings, and the ones with autism themselves? I think that's a very good comment, a very astute comment, because I think that is our focus, but I don't think it means to be discriminatory, because we welcome anybody who is a teenager or an adult on the autism spectrum, and we've had a lot of those individuals on the show because I, as a parent of a child on the autism spectrum, value your opinion and want to hear your opinion, and so we'd actually like to have you here on the show if you're interested, because and I think that for the most part, we gear most of our things towards parents, teachers, and practitioners. That's what we say every morning, and maybe we should think about that. Maybe that's something that we really need to be more aware of. I'm going to put that in my thinking cap. But another person wrote and said bedtime because she refuses to settle down at night, can't find, and they're saying that they're interested in medication. I want to encourage you that, I know that there's medication to be given for bedtime ritual, but I think, and we just talked to Angela Persicke about this, that we know that there are bedtime behavioral interventions that are effective with some of our kids. I hope that you're investigating that before you go towards any kind of medical, and that's just my opinion, because when we do behavior interventions, they tend to be a lot safer and don't create other issues which sometimes medication can. just my opinion. But, you know, to each their own. Another person who says dinner time. And we just showed a video earlier with Keith Williams, who is an expert on feeding issues. And I hope that we can, in the coming weeks, we have a plan to talk about more feeding issues. Okay. Another person who says that they're using the medication and it's not making a difference, that their child will not sleep through the night. I would be really interested in, again, having you look at some of the bedtime pass or something like that, see if that ends up being helpful. Another person who says in the morning before school and at bedtime. It isn't until they take their meds that they get easier. So we're hearing lots of different things about medication, and I know that for a lot of people that is, you know, that if you're at that point, I have no judgments. Okay, another person who says after work, school, daycare, my wee one goes nuts, especially if I have things to do. You know, can I tell you that I had a friend who made a suggestion to me because I was coming home from work and picking up my child and getting home, and I just needed some time. You know what I'm saying? I just needed a minute. I just need everybody to give me a minute. And my child was a little bit zooey, and I remember it was like a year and a half ago when I went back to work and I said, man, I'm having a problem with this period of time during the day. And another autism mom said, oh, because everybody's making the transition. And one of the things that she suggested was that I have something already set up for my child to do to help them transition so that I could transition. Oh, man. And, you know, now it takes an even shorter amount of time, but in the beginning, it took a little bit longer for him to transition and me to transition. I think both of us are getting better at doing it quicker. But if there's something, you know, physical for them to do, if there's, especially because I think the kids, they come home from school and they've had all this sensory stuff and they just need a couple of minutes to get their yayas out. And we, on the other hand, I don't know about you, but I need time. I'd like to be in a dark room with total quiet. Put me in one of those sensory deprivation tanks. Whoo, that's what I need, right? But that's a hard time, that transition time. I think anytime there's transition. Oh, here's the next person says late afternoon because we are both completely drained. Yeah, and sometimes we just have to lower our expectations of what's going to happen. The hardest time of day for my son is the morning. He wakes with a smile, but then he realizes he has school, transition being his issue. It can be difficult for him. You know, thank you for writing that, because I think that morning is a hard time for a lot of us. I love the idea that your child is waking for a smile, waking with a smile. And my question would be is what's happening at school that transition is so hard? Is there any way that you can power pack school so that it's more reinforcing? We need for school to be reinforcing. It's they're going to go to school for a lot of years. So it's got to be a fun time. And, you know, maybe talking to the teacher about how they got to have something that's really exciting. I told the story about the other day. I think the older my son gets, the more he realizes, because he always has loved school, but the older he gets and the more he gets interested in things at home, the less he wants to go in, and the harder the work gets at school, it's getting a little bit more difficult, right? And the first day of school this year, a little bumpy. And then we sent him back the second day, and we were trying to build it with all these things to make it more reinforcing, and little did I know we did not need to do that because they were handing out the laptops. That in his school, fourth grade is the first year that they have the money for each individual child to be assigned a laptop, and they share with other classes, so they don't have a laptop the whole day or even, you know, every day, but they trade back and forth so that they can do assignments on the laptop. And it changed his whole view of school. He was so excited about it. So, you know, is there something that could make school more fun for your child? Oh, and I love this one too. Mornings. Time crunches are stressful. And I love these because you guys are acknowledging that it's stressful for everybody. Absolutely everybody. You know, we have Evelyn Gould on, and she talks about how difficult that morning time thing is and how we can help ourselves by finding different strategies to make it easier for ourselves as much as possible. If it means packing the backpack the night before, laying the clothes out the night before, packing our stuff up the night before, so that we're not in that, you know, look at it and say, there's a lot you don't have control over. And I was saying the other day, I wish I could pack the whole lunch the night before, but you can't because stuff gets soggy, right? But packing as much as you can so that you can grab this, that, and the other thing and then make the one thing that has to be made. You know, figuring out anything that you actually have control of that could make it easier. Then one of the examples that Evelyn likes to use a lot, she had one little boy that she was working with, and every time they would go to leave the house, there was a big issue because there was a basket of toys right by the door, and the rule was always that the child could take 2 toys, but deciding which 2 toys was like the material of meltdowns, right? And so the decision was made, and you just go, oh gosh, how simple could this be? But to take the basket and put it upstairs so that it wasn't by the door. So that if there was a decision to be made and any angst to go over beforehand, it wasn't happening at the door. And it was amazing. Absolutely amazing, the difference that it took. So sometimes, you know, thinking outside the box, how can I make this less stressful? Okay, another person who says afternoons are the hardest. Time between camp/school and home to dinner time. He has a hard time transitioning back to home routine. Yeah, it really can be. And I think depending on how exhausted your child is, having them engage in a physical activity, I'm going to say this and you're going to think this is weird, but now that there are so many video game things that are out there that, like the Kinect, like the Wii, like I can't think what it's called on the Xbox that makes it so that the children can interact and be physical. Setting them up with something like that, if they find video games reinforcing and having them engage in physical behavior, sometimes that's the thing that makes the transition easier. I loved my son's kindergarten teacher. Every time they would transition, they would do some kind of physical thing to shake off the thing that they did before. It really kind of works, and it works for adults too. If I've had to get my head off of one thing and onto the next, stand up and do the hokey pokey, as weird as it sounds, for a second, and your brain can shift to something else. Another person who says lately bedtime. To bed as late as 4 a.m. Oh, sister, you're singing my song. And up by 8 a.m. at latest. School starts for my teen next week. She has to be at school by 7:20, so don't know when I will sleep. Before the sleeping issue got bad, hardest part of the day was going anywhere besides the grocery store. And especially because it sounds like you've got a younger one who is having trouble sleeping, and you've got a teen that you got to be up for that early. It might be time to call in somebody to consult and get the bedtime thing under control. I got to tell you, when you can't sleep, man. And I shared my little guy, it would be 2:30 in the morning, and I'd be driving around the block thinking, what is going to become of us? How am I going to get through the rest of my life and do this? I get some help. At that point, that's when you need it. Here is another one that says, where am I? Big discussions about medicines on here, which you guys can check out. Somebody says 4 to 6 p.m. Is the time of day that's difficult for them. I'm hearing a lot of that transition around dinner time. Another person who says bedtime is the hardest for my son. He has a very hard time settling down, and more and more discussions about medicines. Well, I'm glad you guys are talking about it. Dinner time has always been rough, but lately he has been having a hard time nightly fits over brushing his teeth. I'm not sure if it's a sensory related or routine based yet. I love this mom that she's thinking of it from both those sides. We recently switched the routine for a couple of days when his sister wasn't home, and we just haven't been able to find the calm ever since. Isn't that amazing? And you know, I love that you're looking at it from that point of view and saying, is this a sensory issue or is this a routine issue? And it could be that there's a little bit of both. But since brushing the teeth didn't used to be a big deal, maybe I need to take him to a dentist to look and see if there's something that's hurting. You know, that would be my first go-to, to make sure to rule that out, because you can change everything behaviorally, but if it's something that's actually physically hurting, it's not going to make a difference. And it could be something that's related sensory to something that's not teeth related, but if it's a teeth related thing and they're in pain, you can change everything sensory and you're not going to get to it, and it'll be something that's really quick to alleviate. I realize that there's probably an expense involved with going to the dentist, but you know, you probably could go and do a quick checkup. It might be close to the time that they need one anyway, and rule that out, because if it is that, then you're going to have your fix almost immediately. And if you've ruled it out, then you're going to be that much closer to knowing what's happening. We always like to rule out that it's medical first, right? Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. There's a lot more of these. I'm going to kind of weed through and see, because we're getting a lot of similar responses. But stick with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today, was founded in 2004 by several passionate parents who believe that access to early, effective treatment is vital for individuals with autism. Together with Dr. Doreen Graham-Pache, the world's leading provider of therapy for autism, this group created ACT Today to do just as the name implies, take action immediately to treat autism spectrum disorders.
A lot of families and parents and even physicians don't yet accept the fact that we are recovering children with autism.
In 2006, inspired by her struggle to get treatment for her young son Wyatt, television producer and author Nancy Alspaugh Jackson and her husband Reed hosted a backyard benefit for the foundation called Denim and Diamonds for Autism. Tens of thousands of dollars were raised, and in 2008, Alspaugh Jackson took the helm of ACT Today as executive director.
This country has to come together to save a generation of children.
With a dedicated board of directors, a small but committed staff called the A-Team, as in autism, ACT Today is making a huge difference in the lives of children across the country. Grants that fund programs for behavior therapy, special needs schools, and summer camps. Medical needs like diagnostic tests and special diets. Basic safety equipment such as helmets for children who repetitively bang their heads, and fencing for those who wander. Assisted technologies and assistance dogs.
Hi, my name is Max, and I love my iPad too. It's so great. I can take photos.
In 2010, ACT for Military Families became the first national campaign to benefit military children with autism.
I'm Joe Montaigne. As a father of a daughter with autism, I know the challenges that brings.
ACT Today continues to educate and raise national awareness on the need for early and intensive intervention for an epidemic that affects at least 1 in 110 children.
I called on November 1st. And I'm like, how am I going to get notified? How are you going to let me know? And they ended up looking and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above.
ACT Today, fulfilling its mission of helping families with autism, one child at a time.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I have to stop and take a second because somebody also wrote in and said wonderful things, and I just want to say thank you because I can't tell you how much we listen to what you guys say to us and how we really take it to heart. And we spend so much time thinking about how can we be of more use to you and what can we do to help you. And I always say to you guys, I gave up mind reading to be an autism mom, so I don't know. And a lot of people will come to me and say, well, what do autism parents want to know? And I always say, I can't begin to know what everything that you guys need. I don't know. But I love it when you tell us. I love it when you tell us, and I love it when you tell us when something isn't working, and I appreciate it when you tell us when something is working. So thank you so much for writing in and saying that there's stuff happening on the show that's working for you. And and saying that we've been able to do some stuff that's useful to you, because I got to tell you, when you guys write in and tell us that is so helpful, and that we are in this together. You guys support me, whether you realize it all the time or not, but you do, because you guys write in and ask questions, and I go, that didn't even occur to me. Or you write in and you say something, and it reminds me, oh my gosh, I'm on this journey with a bunch of people. I am not in this alone. None of us are. It's different for all of us, right? We're all in separate cars, and our cars function in different ways, and we got different issues, right? But we are all in this together. None of us are alone, and I so appreciate you guys tuning in and writing in and helping us to know how we can better serve you. And don't forget that the whole time I'm sitting here and just another parent in another car learning along the way. But thank you so much for writing in. We are so appreciative. I do want to go back to some of these questions, to the answers to the questions. What's the hardest time of the day for you? Because this is a really interesting one that I saw. That's a lot of you wrote in and said morning. A lot of you wrote in and said afternoon, and a lot of you wrote in and said dinner time, and a lot of you said bedtime. I think that's like the crux of what everybody has been writing in. But somebody wrote in and said pooping time, because he always gets super silly, off the hook right before he finally poops. Now this is of great interest to me. Not that the other things weren't, they all were. Because do you know what my son does? He gets super silly after the poop. And it's something that we've looked at for a lot of years, that after my son goes to the bathroom, he gets silly. And it's so funny to me because I've never heard of anybody addressing the same thing and saying that it happens beforehand. Now, one of the things that we've looked at with my son is because a lot of people have said they think it's the bathroom, that the bathroom and spending that amount of time in the bathroom has the potential to get him off course. I like to say that he disintegrates, and I don't mean disintegrates like we can't see him, but he's integrated physically. He goes into the bathroom and he comes out and he is not attached to himself anymore. He's like floating off into space, and we need to reground him. And I've had people say, well, maybe it's because bathrooms tend to be echoey, that they tend to have a lot more tile. And when you say something and somebody's talking, the sound bounces around, and that there's a sensory component to it. Other people have said, well, there are a lot of reflective surfaces in a bathroom that have the potential to sensory be something that throws somebody off balance. There's a mirror, and there's a lot of chrome and things that are shiny and different echoey noises in the echo. So that's one of the questions that we've always had about, is that, because he will get silly. And we've had a lot of different people look at it, and it's one of those things that it's something that's happening internally. So I don't know that we're ever going to get the absolute answer for why he has a difficulty when we're leaving the bathroom. But I do know that we've looked at it from a behavior standpoint and tried to shore him up so that he's aware of it and that he makes different choices upon leaving the bathroom. We've had some, I mentioned earlier we were going to talk about antecedent and consequence. So sometimes we do an antecedent modification where, and depending on where we are, if I know that what's going to happen is that my son is going to come out of the bathroom silly, and we're in a circumstance where we don't have time for that, right? There are things that I will do differently upon going into the bathroom, that I'll talk to him about it beforehand, that I distract him in the bathroom, that I keep him completely engaged. Now, I don't go in the stall with him anymore. I'm outside the stall, but I keep talking to him, and sometimes, do you know what I do? I have him do math problems while he's in the stall. You know, is it crazy, or is it crazy like a fox? I don't know. But it was one of the suggestions that we had so that he doesn't have the opportunity to get into silly, that it uses a different part of his brain where he has to stay very logical. So we do multiplication. And for a lot of time, you know, we were having days where we would say, before you can play video games, especially during the summer, you have to do this, 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 and this. And for a long time it was, you have to do a certain number of multiplication problems. So I would take him into the bathroom and I would say, well, this counts towards your multiplication tables. And now I just don't even bother doing that, but he'll go in and I'll say, hey, what's, 9 times 5? And then he'll tell me the answer, and then I'll ask him another question, because I'm using that really logical part of his brain, and I see that whether it's a sensory thing or whatever, he doesn't focus on it as much. And so we leave the bathroom and he's not silly. It's the funniest thing. But I would be interested to know, since your child, it's happening right before he poops, does it happen once he goes into the bathroom, or is it before he even goes into the bathroom? This is why this is of deep interest to me. So if you have the opportunity to write back and tell us, I'm very intrigued, because these are the kinds of things, this is why I say having a global support group is such a good thing, because in your local support group, when you're talking about things that you're going to do in the community, and who does the best haircut and who's the best dentist to go to that's going to be considerate of the fact that your child's going to have sensory issues, all those different things, but you may not in your local support group find somebody else whose child gets silly around the time they have a bowel movement. And that's why you need the global support group. So now I found somebody else who has this issue in a different way. I'm very, very intrigued. Okay. Let's take another short break, and then it's time to close out the show, but we've got some things that we want to talk about that are going to be happening tomorrow. So check this out, and we'll be right back after these messages. I'm here today with Sarah Cho, who is the managing supervisor of CARD Fresno. And she's a wonderful resource, and today we're going to be talking with her about using assisted technology.
If you are a parent of a child who is primarily nonvocal and maybe has been using a type of iconic communication system, and you are recognizing that your child has really just outgrown it. It is something, they need something faster, they need something better. There's so much more that we can do in the world of augmentative devices. I am a huge fan of using augmentative device programs on cell phones and also on iPads. As you and I were chatting, we had just downloaded a really simple tap-to-talk program. So for this one, all a child would need to be able to do is just tap on what they wanted.
I want a drink.
And then that immediately pulls up a screen where there's water, juice, milk, soda, and smoothie. So maybe the child just wanted a drink of their water.
Water, please.
And it's that simple. And there's not a lot to manipulate. The child does not have to have really advanced motor skills at all.
We're seeing more and more organizations advocating getting an iPad because of all those features. But it's not just for kids who are non-vocal.
We have a lot of kids, who have significant impairment in their sensory regulation. They really are seeking visual input, auditory input, tactile input. And if they're learning to appropriately play with a cell phone or with an iPad or with a computer, it provides those levels of appropriate sensory stimulation. So you're getting appropriate sensory, hopefully leading to a decrease in some of those repetitive behaviors, and you're teaching age-appropriate play skills. You know, they have free apps even if you're working on verb use, and the child can actually scroll through the different pictures and practice talking and narrating what they see in the pictures. There's just a lot of wonderful things that you can get from devices nowadays. You know, whether we're looking at language, social, play.
For my son, it's quite the social thing. When he sees somebody else who has one, he gravitates to them and they start playing together. It really starts the conversation with the other child.
What games do you have? What apps do you have? Can I play that one? Can I see it?
And a lot of the apps are super inexpensive or free.
Or free.
Which is, you can't be free. Free is good.
You know, so I mean, you might have that initial investment in actually purchasing an appropriate device, but then a lot of the software or things that you need, you know, are free or relatively inexpensive. There are also some really nice applications that might be a little bit more expensive, maybe like $20 or $30, where you can essentially download the entire, for example, PEC's icon library for just that little initial, you know, investment.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're getting close to the end of the show, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going to happen tomorrow here on Autism Live. Of course, it's Friday, so we're going to have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, who is just wonderful. If you haven't been here when Dr. Jonathan Tarbox is here, I encourage you to be here. He is the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, but he is also the director of the Autism Research Group. They're an organization that asks parents, what would you like to have researched? What are you interested in? Because they want it to be something that's meaningful to a family. That, you know, research that really makes a difference in your day. I know we've seen all kinds of research that we go, really? Why were you doing that? Honestly, do we need to know that? Didn't we already know that? A lot of times I'm a little mystified by the things that happen in the research world. So I love the fact that they're asking us. That, to me, is wonderful. So Jonathan's here with us at 11 o'clock tomorrow. But at 10:20, we're going to be joined by Eric Peacock. And he is one of the co-founders of something called My Autism Team. I think you guys are going to be really interested in this. And you know, a lot of times people will have a health support system, and you go to it and it says, you know, here is the page for this disorder, and here's the page for these kinds of things, or here's the page for diabetes, and here's the page for this kind of cancer, and here's the page for this kind of cancer. Not that I would want those things not to exist, but often the autism page is the last one. That there you will see autism page coming, or you know, it has the least resources because it's the newest kid on the block. What I love about this, they've created something called My Health Team, and guess what their first page is? Their first page is My Autism Team. And so I'm excited to have Eric come on the show and say why they've started with autism, but I also think this is just genuinely a great idea. I'm always talking to you about that local support and the global support. Well, it's almost as if they've taken these two things and put them together in a way that's kind of like an Angie's List. You know, you've seen the commercials for Angie's List, that when you have somebody come and work on your home and have a contractor or a plumber or somebody like that work on your home, and you leave a review for them on Angie's List, and other people come along, so that if you don't know a plumber in your community and you want to have a rating where nobody benefited from it and nobody paid anybody to do it, and you have a place to look and see what people's comments are, well, it's like that, that you can find out information about the people that you want to be working with your child, whether it's ABA or a speech therapist or an OT or, you know, a barber or somebody like that, a place in which you can get all of that in one place, which I think is amazing. And especially now that we are seeing autism insurance happen in more and more states, and I was having this conversation with somebody last night, there are going to be more and more ABA providers out there, and if we are going to kid ourselves and think that they are all equal and even, we're going to be really disappointed. So knowing who is providing services, where they're listening to parents, where they're seeing progress, where they're getting job one done. So very important. And I think that this idea, my autism team, is going to be very helpful and useful for all of us. So Eric Peacock is going to be here tomorrow. That's at 10:20. You're not going to want to miss that. And then stick around for Jonathan Tarbox at 11 o'clock. He is such an awesome person because he's such a wealth of information. I always say I want to get in his brain and know everything that he knows, but he also says it in such a way. I've never heard somebody talk and use jargon as little as Dr. Tarbox does, and if he does use jargon, he explains it as he goes. I know a lot of parents out there who just love an opportunity to hear him speak live, and we're so fortunate that we get to talk to him every week. If you have questions for Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, now's a great time to write them in, and in fact, we're going to go over some of the different ways that you can be in touch with us as we end the show, because I always like to say, as this show ends, the conversation continues and continues and continues. So Emily's showing you how you can email in overnight if you've got questions for either Eric Peacock or for Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. You can be writing those questions in, and I'm going to have her, because we're almost out of time, just cycle through. There are ways you can phone in, you can Skype in, you can talk to us on Facebook, you can talk to us via tweet, you can be watching the show on blip.tv overnight. You can be watching it here, but if you want to search certain topics, try Blip, try YouTube, and download us for free on iTunes. We're available in all of those different ways. Use the information in the way that works the best for you and help us to know how we can be of more service to you. That's what we want to be, is of service to you, hook you up with the people who are going to help you to be the best possible person you can be on your child's team. It means the world to us that you spend this time with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.